Chapter 327. Ryuto was naturally very satisfied with what happened in his bedroom last night. When he got up early in the morning and looked at Yunyen, colored glaze, and Dunya lying on the side, he actually had the heroic spirit of an emperor that said, "Look, this is my country." After all, other than the ancient emperors, there was probably no one in the world who could have three outstanding beauties at the same time. Moreover, he could let them sleep on the same bed. That feeling was simply amazing. However, early the next morning, when colored glaze and Dunya silently washed up, tidied up their clothes and went out for breakfast, Ryuto, who had been smiling since he woke up, quickly stopped smiling. Logically speaking, after last night's unprecedented King's game, Ryuto thought that the relationship between the two women should be much better. At least, they wouldn't quarrel every day like before. Who would have thought that while things were getting better, they were getting better too much, so much so that things were developing in a strange and extreme direction. At the dining table, colored glaze and Dunya intimately sat together. The two of them looked at each other, and there was a flash of electricity in their eyes. "Sister colored glaze, try this. It's a strawberry biscuit with sour cream. It's delicious." Dunya had an orange smile on her face. She used a fork to pick up a small piece of biscuit from her plate and sent it to colored glaze's mouth. Colored glaze also didn't hesitate to eat the food that Dunya sent over. After nodding, she said in an orange voice, "Sister Dunya, try mine too. This grilled sori with lemon juice is not bad. It doesn't have any fishy smell." "Oh, really? I didn't like to eat fish before, but after trying it, I realized that the taste was really good. I became addicted immediately." Indeed, people have to try everything. If I didn't try sour cream biscuits, I would have thought that I only like to eat fish. You can't be so inflexible. Don't be bound by fixed concepts. You have to accept more new things. That's right, that's right. If you don't free yourself, you'll never know what you really like. Hee hee. Just like that, colored glaze and Dunya chatted and laughed as they fed each other. It felt like they were a pair of very close sisters, or a pair of intimate lovers. Especially the topic they were talking about. Although they seemed to be talking about food on the surface, it felt as if they were talking about something else. They weren't talking about food at all. Clang! Ryuto was so frightened that he dropped his silver chopsticks on the table, making a soft sound. He quickly whispered into Yunyen's ear, "What's going on with these two guys? Why did they become so close after last night? Don't you think it's too good?" Yunyen was also surprised by the sudden change in her two sisters. She could only reply, "Well, maybe they developed a new hobby." "New hobby? Don't tell me. It's the kind of thing you think. There can be love between women. It's not a rare thing." "No, it can't be." Colored glaze and Dunya, they got lesbian? Boom. When he saw that the harem at the dining table had become a couple and a pair of lesbians, Ryuto felt as if a bolt of lightning had struck him from the sky. It made his hair stand on end. God, I arranged the King's game yesterday in hopes that their relationship would improve a little. At least, they wouldn't quarrel all the time. But in the end, it did improve, but it became too good all of a sudden. They became a pair of lesbians? Great, now that my two wives have become lesbians, what am I left for? Just when Ryuto was shocked speechless by the scene in front of him, colored glaze, who had finished her breakfast, held Dunya's hand and stood up. She smiled and said, "We'll be leaving first. Don't bother us if there's nothing. We're busy here." That's right, that's right. How about staying at your place tonight? Sister colored glaze's bed must be very soft. Sure, you can stay as long as you want. It's definitely better than the bed here. My, harem. As colored glaze and Dunya held hands and left while blooming lilies, Ryuto, whose brain was boiling, could only gasp for air and fall into Yunyen's magnanimous motherly embrace. However, when Ryuto was stunned by his King's game, colored glaze and Dunya, who were holding hands and walking out of the Rulon Group headquarters, let go of their hands and looked at each other. Especially when the two got into the dancing costumes car and drove towards the Dori First High School, Dunya finally couldn't hold back her laughter and said, "Pfft, ha 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 ha. Did you see that? Ryuto's stunned expression just now. It was so satisfying. Humph. Serves him right. That bastard teamed up with Yunyen to mess with us. After getting into the car, Colored Glaze's face quickly returned to her usual calm expression. The previous blooming look of love immediately disappeared without a trace. From this angle, the two were clearly acting just now. They teamed up to put on a classic Lily's Last Forever, Men Get Lost, scene for her man. Wasn't that right? How could Lioli and Dunia be lesbians? They clearly both liked men. Even if they got drunk last night and got intimate in bed for a while, they wouldn't change their orientation so quickly. The reason why the two acted in front of Ryuto was mainly because Colored Glaze was unhappy, and so was Dunia. When the two woke up early in the morning, it wasn't difficult to think carefully. What happened last night was obviously that bastard Ryuto teamed up with Yunyen to set a trap for the two of them. If it wasn't for the trick, it wouldn't have been possible to play so many rounds of the king game. In the end, it was Colored Glaze and Dunia who got intimate with each other. This wasn't a coincidence, it was completely treating them like fools. Therefore, Colored Glaze teamed up with Dunia to put on the scene in the morning. The purpose was to teach Ryuto a lesson and let him know not to treat his wife like a fool. Otherwise, his wife would treat him like a fool. But I didn't expect our acting to be so realistic. It really gave that guy a big scare. Indeed, it seems that after quarreling for so long, we more or less developed some tacit understanding. At this point, Colored Glaze and Dunia couldn't help but look at each other and smile. It was more or less a feeling of forgetting their enmity with a smile. Speaking of which, the two of them didn't have any huge grudges between them. It was only because of their personalities and hobbies that they often had some minor friction, which was why they quarreled from time to time. However, after the indescribable incident last night and the lily blooming incident in the morning, Colored Glaze and Dunia looked at each other more or less pleasing to the eye. Their conversation was also much smoother and more harmonious. From this point of view, Ryuto's goal of playing the king game last night had been completely achieved. The relationship between the two of them had indeed improved by quite a bit. But just as the two of them were chatting and laughing as they sat in the car in the dancing costume to head to school, a sudden commotion came from the street not far away. Ah! The commotion started with a woman's scream. Accompanied by the screams of that woman, a man whose muscles swelled unnaturally, and veins popped out from every part of his body. Like a mini bulldozer, he rampaged through the streets. Ha ha ha! Ha 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 ha! I'm the strongest! I'm invincible under the heavens! No one can stop me! When the man crazily ran through the street, and from time to time, he would use both hands to pull out fire hydrants and smash phone booths. The surrounding pedestrians were scared by this madman and fled in all directions. The scene suddenly became chaotic. That guy is... He's not normal. It seems like he took some kind of strange drug. The moment the man went crazy on the street, Dancing Costume unconsciously stopped the car and looked at the guy who was violently smashing phone booths about 100 meters away on the street. When anyone saw this guy, they would probably define him as a madman in their mind. Because his actions were too terrifying, and that crazy expression and tone of voice made people feel that he wasn't a normal person. But before the arrival of the police, the surrounding pedestrians could only hurriedly flee in order to avoid being accidentally hit by this guy's fist. If they were hit, it would be no joke. Even the aluminum phone booths were as fragile as a piece of paper in his hands. Seeing this situation, Dancing Costume, as the guardian ninja, quickly asked Colored Glaze, "Miss, should I..." Originally, Dancing Costume wanted to ask, "Should I go deal with that guy?" But she didn't expect that before she could finish her sentence, Dunia's petite figure had already quickly opened the car door and rushed over there. When Dunia rushed over there, the somewhat cumbersome dress on her body was violently torn by the wind, as if she was using all her strength to whip it. Fast, too fast, almost everyone present only saw a blur, and that petite figure had already arrived in front of the crazy brawny man. Then, that slender hand grabbed and pulled, and in the midst of the claw, for waves of bone-cracking sounds came from the brawny man's four limbs. Boom! Even the brawny man himself didn't have time to react. His knees and shoulders were already shattered, and his body fell to the ground like a pile of mud. What? What's going on? Why can't I move? I'm the most. Shut up, you idiot. Seeing that the burly man was still talking nonsense on the ground, Dunia casually kicked out with her foot, kicking his consciousness out of the sky. From the moment Dunia appeared to the moment the brawny man's limbs were shattered and he fell to the ground unconscious, only about a second had passed. This scene was more magical than a movie, and all the surrounding audience were stunned, and they even mistakenly thought that they were daydreaming. Chapter 328. That guy just now was obviously abnormal. He must have taken some strange anesthetic. This is the third time I've seen this situation recently. Not long after, when Dunia got back into the car and drove toward Dory First High School, she couldn't help but say to Colored Glaze, who was deep in thought. Indeed, there had been a sudden increase in similar situations recently. Whether it was in the underground arena, in various dojos, or in dark corners, Dunia could always see or hear similar strange things. Today, it even happened on the street. Lu Li naturally knew the reason for this abnormal situation better than anyone else. That's because the Heavenly Eye group is secretly distributing Hell Butterfly in batches. Although it's a weakened version, it's enough to make some people lose their self-control. When this matter was mentioned, Colored Glaze also had a headache because this was indeed not a problem of one or two people, but a problem that had developed to the whole world. Since a month ago, this kind of thing had been happening from time to time. Asia, Europe, South America, Africa. Almost every country in every continent had this kind of abnormal physical state caused by the use of anesthetics, and cases of the mind becoming manic. According to the investigation of Colored Glaze and the others, these signs were very similar to the Hell Butterfly that Ryuto encountered before. However, the anesthetics that appeared in large batches now were not as strong as the Hell Butterfly. The increase in physical ability was more limited, and it was not to the extent of sudden death on the spot after the effect of the drug. At most, they would become disabled. From this point of view, the anesthetics that those people took should be called weakened Hell Butterfly. After taking it, it would only cause the physical ability to increase and the mind to become extremely excited. It was not as exaggerated as the original version, as if they had become a modified monster. But even so, the appearance of this kind of weakened Hell Butterfly in such a large area really confused many people in this world. Where did this thing come from? Where did it come from? Needless to say, Colored Glaze and the others knew that the Heavenly Eye group deliberately let these anesthetics flow into the market. In addition to the anesthetics raging under the surface of the water, the already chaotic situation in the Middle East had become even more chaotic this month. The small countries and forces that were fighting against each other suddenly obtained a batch of elite weapons and instantly expanded the scope of the war by a few levels. The group of terrorists even kidnapped a large number of foreign journalists and staff stationed in the Middle East and demanded large amounts of ransom from the countries they belonged to. Because of this incident, the international community had long been thrown into chaos. There was the threat of war on the outside and anesthetics on the inside. Under such circumstances, the stock prices of various countries plummeted. The world was like a powder keg that had been squeezed to the limit and could explode at any time. In just 1 month, the world had become like this. It was unimaginable that it was definitely that woman, Tenmu Ayam, who was calling the shots behind the scenes. Good heavens! I still underestimated her. I didn't expect her to be able to go to such an extent. If she was allowed to complete the final decapitation operation, then the world would really be in chaos. Thinking of this, Colored Glaze couldn't help but sigh. According to Ryuto, the Heavenly Eye group provided a large number of weapons and equipment to fund the war, played the economic card to mess up the financial system, and sold anesthetics everywhere to cause chaos. Her last move should be the decapitation operation. The so-called decapitation operation was to set up black feather ninja assassins around the leaders of the major countries in the world. When the time was right, all the assassins would take action at the same time and directly assassinate the leaders of more than 100 countries. This situation had already been experienced by Ryuto in Red Album 2, No One Survived, so Ryuto could completely predict it. It could be said that the Heavenly Eye group was preparing to play a set of combination punches that had been planned for a long time. Anesthetics, firearms, kidnapping, assassination. With such a set, the result was that the world was in chaos. The other countries were in deep trouble for various reasons and couldn't pay attention to other countries' affairs. At this time, Ayam, who had already controlled the cabinet, Congress, Metropolitan Police Department, and other institutions, began to do whatever she wanted in this country and eliminate dissidents until the Sixth Demon's Wrath, a large nuclear bomb, was completed and Japan was annihilated. This plan sounded somewhat whimsical, but the problem was that Ayam really had the ability to realize it. This was the most terrifying part. After listening to Colored Glaze's explanation, Dunia couldn't help but sigh. Then what do we do now? Watch them do things? Not necessarily. Ryuto has already begun to gather the various forces of the underground world to prepare for a counterattack. Let's hope their plan can go smoothly. Speaking until here, Colored Glaze couldn't help but turn her head to look at the Rulong Group HQ that the two of them left. If she didn't remember wrongly, Long Do would be meeting with the leaders of the underground world tonight to explain the cause of the anesthetics epidemic in the underground world and discuss how to solve it. The leaders invited this time included the former leader of the Rulong Group, Yima, the leader of the Big Dipper Alliance, Kai Yang, the leader of the Black Snake Alliance, Tessa, the leader of the Sai River Plain, Hua Shang, the leader of the Amon clan, as well as 4 to 5 other underground forces and so on. Because the people invited to this meeting were the most powerful figures in the underground world, this meeting could be considered as a major event in the entire underground world. In order to increase his influence, Ryuto even invited his old man back from overseas. He had almost called all the people he could call. Therefore, on the same night, in the underground meeting room of the Lawless Land, Sai River Plain, a huge round table was already filled with people. The people around the round table were men and women, old and young. There were tough men in neat white suits, greasy uncles in gamblers' cloaks, beautiful young women, and stern men. But no matter what their appearance was, this group of people without exception emitted a peculiar aura. They emitted a gloomy aura that was obviously caused by living in the underground world for a long time and lacking sunlight. Boss Yima, long time no see. I didn't expect Boss Ryuto to call you back. It's great to see Boss Yima here. With you and your father here, it's as stable as Mount Tai. Speaking of which, is this meeting to discuss the recent anesthetics incident? Those lunatics have almost driven me crazy. Who is the one behind the distribution of those strange drugs? Taking advantage of the time when the person who called this meeting had not arrived, the group of leaders seated around the table greeted their acquaintances. Some even started chatting. Excluding their special identities, if one only looked at the actions of this group of people, perhaps no one would think that this was actually a group of underworld bosses gathering here. It didn't seem too different from a normal gathering of friends. Especially Yima, who had just returned, he naturally received a warm welcome. Even the flower merchant and the others were concerned about his well-being and paid extra attention to him. Yima also exchanged greetings with everyone while sighing at the changes in the world. If it was a few years ago, although he was considered a figure in the extreme Tao, he wouldn't have been able to receive so much respect from these underworld bosses. The reason why Yima was able to receive such treatment was mainly because his Rulong group had an excellent successor. In the more than a year when Yima was on the run, Ryuto had almost made the Rulong group the king of the country's extreme Tao. Now, when the underworld mentioned extreme Tao, the first thing that came to mind was Ryuto. At the same time, only the current dragon battle could gather more than half of the leaders of the underground world to participate in this meeting. This was something that could only be done with a lot of face. Tap, tap, tap. Not long after, along with a series of almost inaudible footsteps, a young man wearing a white suit with a black dragon pattern entered the meeting room and sat at the head of the table. The moment he appeared, the clamor in the room became incomparably quiet. Almost everyone obediently shut their mouths and looked at this young leader of the Black Hand Alliance, and even the entire underground world. First of all, thank you very much for accepting my invitation to participate in this meeting despite your busy schedule. I'm sure everyone is very clear about the purpose of this meeting. It is the various chaos that has occurred in the underworld and the surface world recently. As the convener of this meeting, Ryuto first briefly introduced the weakened hell butterfly that was currently rampant in the underworld. Then, he brought out the source of this matter, which was the Heavenly Eye Group. Good Lord! It's actually the Heavenly Eye Group? What are they planning to do? Are they crazy? They are arms dealers. They probably plan to mess up the world so that they can reap the benefits. Aren't all arms dealers like this? From the looks of it, they are also involved in the situation in the Middle East. What a bunch of scum. After hearing about the Heavenly Eye Group, the group of extreme Dao bosses couldn't help but start to angrily scold. After all, this time, the Heavenly Eye Group spread the weakened hell butterfly on a large scale in the black market. The residents of the underworld were the biggest victims. Naturally, they had been suppressing their anger for a long time. Seeing that the emotions of the participants had been stirred up by him, Ryuto continued, "So, now we should... Not good, boss. Watch the TV. Something big is happening." Just as Ryuto was about to announce the establishment of the Underground Alliance Army to attack the subordinate companies of the 4 departments one by one, Sensible's voice suddenly came from the electronic screen not far away. Immediately after, the live TV program immediately popped up on the screen. The Prime Minister's special announcement. When everything was over, Ryuto and the others immediately saw the thin old man standing on the podium in a suit. The current Prime Minister of Nippon and Yotsuki, Golden Heron, Shinzo Tanagawa. Chapter 329. Shinzo Tanagawa? As the Prime Minister, why did he suddenly start this kind of public speech? Why wasn't there any news beforehand? Long Do, who was sitting in the main seat, couldn't help but frown when he saw the skinny old man on TV. He had to admit that the timing was really sensitive. There were just signs of chaos in the world, and the underground world's ghetto were also preparing to crusade against the Heavenly Eye Group, but the Prime Minister on TV suddenly gave a public speech. The most important thing was that he didn't receive any information about this speech. Even Kyoji, who was also a Golden Heron, didn't know that this Golden Heron would do this. At the same time, the Prime Minister on the television took a deep breath and said in a heavy tone, "To the viewers in front of the television, I'm very sorry to disturb your daily lives with this emergency announcement. But even so, I have to explain the current situation to the people of our country." The people? Give an explanation? What kind of explanation is he going to give? Hearing this, the ghetto bosses sitting around the round table couldn't help but show a puzzled expression. A situation like this where the Prime Minister suddenly came out to make an emergency announcement was rare even in the past. Basically, it was only possible to see it after some very special natural and man-made disasters. At this time, the current Prime Minister, Shinzo Tanagawa, who was in the studio, reported solemnly, "I believe that our citizens have recently discovered that some strange drugs have appeared in various cities of our country. After being taken, these drugs will cause mental and physical problems, which will then lead to all kinds of riots." When the Prime Minister said this, the television began to play some strange muscle-bound men fighting on the streets, brawling, or rampaging. For this situation, the ghetto bosses present were very familiar with it. After all, since the weakened hell butterfly was widely circulated in the black market recently, such muscular men often appeared. But why? Why did the Prime Minister suddenly interrupt this kind of emergency announcement at this time? Wait. Could it be? That guy isn't planning to. Just when Ryuto followed this thought and thought for a while from the perspective of Shinzo Tanagawa, his eyes suddenly widened as he thought of a very troublesome possibility. Today's Ryuto had already reached the level of LV5 resource. Extreme Superman, in wisdom. Although he usually didn't like to use his brain, when he really needed to use his brain was still very fast. So when he saw the Prime Minister suddenly mention that drug in front of the whole country, Ryuto quickly thought of the worst possibility. As expected, Ryuto's guess was correct. Because at the next moment, the Prime Minister on TV slammed the table and shouted in an impassioned tone, "Who is it? Who secretly allowed this drug to circulate everywhere?" I believe that the people already have the same answer. It's the extreme gangsters who live like rats in the underground world. What? When the Prime Minister on TV changed the topic and put the blame on everyone present, even the calmest Itsuma couldn't help but widen his eyes. And the hot-tempered flower merchant quickly slammed the table and stood up, shouting, "Bull ***** tea! This bastard actually intends to put all the blame on us. What is this? Is he picking on the weak?" Everyone present was well aware that the weakened hell butterfly was not a drug that was circulated in the underground world at all, because this anesthetic destroyed the order of the underground world. Who would do such a thing in their own territory? But it was useless. No matter how angry they were, they had to admit one thing. That was, the residents living in normal society would never think that they were innocent. For ordinary people, the gangsters and gangsters who lived in the underground society were a group of dregs of society. They were a group of evil people who would do anything for money. It was natural for them to sell illegal drugs. In other words, from the moment the Prime Minister raised his arm and shouted on TV, they had already firmly shouldered the blame, and there was no room for protest. Just when this group of extreme gangsters of the underground world were angry, the Prime Minister on TV still did not stop his performance. He said in a very provocative tone, "Why did this happen? It's because we are too weak. It's because we turned a blind eye to the evil under the sun. It's because we didn't put all the gangsters in prison. But it's not too late to make up for this mistake." Voila! As the Prime Minister stretched out his hand, a huge screen fell from behind him, and the names of many organizations were densely written on the screen. Looking carefully, such as Rulon Group, Big Dipper Alliance, Black Snake Alliance, Sai River Plain. Almost all the underground organizations that could be named in Japan were neatly marked on it. Is this our organization name? Is this old man planning to? Seeing these densely packed names, some of the people present had already guessed what Tanagawa Jinzo would say in a while. Remember these. These are the people who made trouble in Japan. These are the group of cockroaches that made this country fall into chaos. Sure enough, the Prime Minister walked to the screen and slapped the names on it one by one, and his tone gradually became gnashing teeth. Finally, he suddenly picked up the microphone and shouted, "So now I officially announce that Japan will launch the most severe, extreme gangster bill in history from tomorrow onwards. This group of trash that brings disaster to the world will not be spared, and all of them will be expelled. Banish them from this beautiful and sacred country." Immediately afterward, the specific content of the so-called Extreme Gangster Bill began to play on the screen. It included but was not limited to, all extreme gangster members and their immediate family members are prohibited from attending any school. All extreme gangster members and their immediate family members are prohibited from joining any company. All extreme gangster members and their immediate family members are prohibited from applying for bank cards. All extreme gangster members and their immediate family members are prohibited from taking trams, subways, trains, planes, taxis, and other operating means of transportation. All extreme gangster members and their immediate family members are prohibited from entering restaurants, hospitals, hotels, supermarkets, entertainment venues, and other operating places. All extreme gangster members and their immediate family members are prohibited from buying any real estate. Because they were too shocked, they didn't even know what kind of expression they should make. Good gangster bill. It really wants to drive people to the brink of extinction. Even if Ryuto had already expected that the Prime Minister would be ruthless to the extreme gangster chosen by them, he didn't expect that guy to be so ruthless. If this bill was really enacted, then almost all the residents of the underground world would be completely exterminated, and it would be difficult for them to even survive. Because according to the bill, the group of people defined as extreme gangster could do almost nothing in this country. They couldn't work, they couldn't study, they couldn't shop, they couldn't take public transportation. And it wasn't just them, even their whole family would be punished. This punishment was really killing. This meant that it was impossible for an extreme gangster to go out and buy a pack of cigarettes. Even if he asked his wife, mother, or daughter to go out and buy cigarettes, they would be refused to sell because they were the extreme gangster's immediate family members. In other words, when a person's identity as extreme gangster was exposed, he would have to face a real social death in this country. That is, his whole family would be separated from the whole society, as if they were on a deserted island. No wonder Tanagawa Jinzo said that he wanted to expel all the extreme gangsters. Wasn't it just expulsion? Under this extremely harsh bill, how could there be any extreme gangsters living here? Not long after, when the emergency program ended, the underground conference room in the Sai River Plain was dead silent, as if everyone was stunned by what they had just heard. Life and death. Now the entire Tokyo and even the entire Japan's underground world had truly entered a period of life and death. And it was because they were the scapegoats that caused it to become like this. Crack. A few minutes later, Tong Shang Kazuma, who was sitting at the round table, couldn't help but hit the table with his fist, smashing a clear round hole on the table. Then he said in a tone that sounded calm but contained a raging fire, "If it's because of our fault that we are being treated like this, then there's nothing to say. But if it's because we have to be punished for others and let the real mastermind behind the scenes go unpunished, I'm not convinced." "No, I'm convinced." 3 simple words, but Tong Shangyima, the leader of this old Taoist clan, was crying bitterly. Of course, he wasn't convinced. Why should he be convinced? The anesthetic was obviously spread by the Heavenly Eye group, but in the end, the Prime Minister's side targeted the underground world and wanted to exterminate this group of extreme Taoists who had been driven to live in the dark like mice without seeing the light of day? Who would be convinced by this kind of thing? Who wouldn't feel aggrieved in their heart? They even wanted to go out and find someone to fight to vent their puzzlement. However, even at this moment, there was still a person at the round table who maintained a calm expression. And this person was naturally Ryuto Kiryu, who was the first to see what Tanagawa Jinzo wanted to do and had already thought of countermeasures. Chapter 330. After thinking for a while, Ryuto could only use the word absolute to describe the response of the Heavenly Eye group this time. That's right, it's the Heavenly Eye group, not the Yata Toru or the Japanese government. Because in Ryuto's view, Tanagawa Shinzo's sudden attack was definitely the arrangement of that old fox, Ayam, and not a spontaneous action by the government. The reason was very simple. Ryuto had long known that Ayam had been planting flags in the official departments in the past few years, such as the Metropolitan Police Department, the Cabinet, the Parliament, and so on. These important departments had probably been infiltrated by the Heavenly Eye group long ago. Moreover, in the original world of Red Album 2, No Survivors, Ayam had assassinated the Prime Minister of Japan and arranged for a substitute who had undergone plastic surgery to replace him, thus achieving total control over the government. In other words, the Japanese Prime Minister who just appeared on TV was probably not the original Shinzo Tanagawa. He was just an actor arranged by Ayam. If Ayam was the one pulling strings behind the scenes, then it was completely understandable that such a situation would occur, because this was part of her set of combo punches. Judging from the current situation, the Heavenly Eye group had spread anesthetics everywhere, causing everyone to panic. Then, through the officials, they could push the blame onto Ryuto and the others. On one hand, they could stabilize the position of the puppet Prime Minister, and on the other hand, they could eliminate one of their biggest opponents. Although Ryuto and Ayam had never met before, the two of them had long regarded each other as their mortal enemy. Since they were mortal enemies, the only path left for them was Mount Hua. Through the extreme law, Yongji not only cleared the suspicion of the Heavenly Eye group, but also forced the Black Hand Alliance to the edge of the cliff. It was a brilliant move. After the emergency notice sent to all the citizens of the country and the filing of the Extreme Deportation Act on TV just now, from tomorrow onwards, Ryuto and the others would become rats on the streets. Every time they went out, they would probably be surrounded by people throwing rotten eggs at them. Their range of activities would also be greatly restricted. This method was equivalent to turning more than 100 million people in the country into the enemy of the underground world. It was equivalent to Ayam having more than 100 million spies and free mercenaries. This was not like eating Mickey's House of Wonders. It was extremely wonderful. At the same time, this bill also dealt a huge blow to the underground world's morale. The group of bosses sitting around the round table couldn't help but feel dejected. Although they were indignant, they were more confused and worried about the future. After a while, Ryuto smiled and said, "Everyone, let's not talk about what happened just now. Let's follow the original plan and discuss how to deal with the Heavenly Eye group first. Hearing Ryuto's words, Kai-yong took a deep breath and said with a bitter smile, "Although that's the case, from tomorrow onwards, we will definitely encounter all kinds of survival problems. Should we postpone the confrontation with the Heavenly Eye group? If it was said that before seeing the emergency report, this group of underground world bosses really wanted to teach them a lesson when they found out that the anesthetic was spread by the Heavenly Eye group behind the scenes. But now, their mood had already become much lower. After all, what was in front of them was a real problem of survival. They didn't even dare to think about how many of their subordinates would run away when the sun rose as usual tomorrow. How could they be in the mood to deal with the enemy? On the contrary, the matter just now was instigated by the Heavenly Eye group. If we want to clear our names, we have to completely defeat them. What? The moment these words were said, everyone was shocked. When Yima heard this, he frowned and said, "The Heavenly Eye group is behind this. It can't be, right? That's the Prime Minister of the country. Could it be that even the Prime Minister of the country has to listen to their orders? It could also be that the Prime Minister who didn't listen to orders is already dead, so they replaced him with this Prime Minister who listens to orders. Leader who listens to orders. So that's how it is. Is it a substitute?" After being hinted at like this, most people immediately thought of this possibility that sounded a bit ridiculous but could be the truth. If the current Prime Minister had already been replaced by a substitute by the Heavenly Eye group, and then stuffed a large number of their own people into the cabinet and parliament, then they could indeed achieve such a level of power. Too scary. Hearing this, Tessa couldn't help but frown. Then how powerful is the Heavenly Eye group? They plan to control this country? They don't intend to control this country, but to destroy it. As far as I know, they're secretly building the largest nuclear bomb in history, the kind that's 100 times more powerful than Fatty and Little Boy. Hiss. Instantly, everyone around the round table was shocked. After all, these words were a bit too exaggerated. If the largest nuclear bomb in history were to explode in this small island country, wouldn't that mean Japan would sink? Phew. Hearing this, Kai-yong sighed. "Although I don't care if this island sinks or not, my family business and brothers are all on it. I can't lose it just like that. Indeed, although there is an option to retreat, that should be left for the end. When we are sure that we can't stop the Heavenly Eye group, then we will consider it. From the looks of it, this country is already controlled by the Heavenly Eye group. Then wouldn't we, who are going against the Heavenly Eye group, become saviors in a sense? Ha ha ha, to think that a bunch of underground extreme Tao cultivators like us would become the saviors of the world, and that group of upper-class people would become the big bad guys. The world is really changing fast." Just like this, everyone started chatting and laughing. The surrounding air gradually became less oppressive. Even a bit of heroism appeared in everyone's heart. Creatures like humans would become very strong when there was something they needed to fight for. When they found out that the Heavenly Eye group did not only want to occupy this country, but also wanted to destroy everything, everyone present understood that they had no way out. Even if they could escape, under the shroud of the upheaval that might happen next, their relatives, friends, and acquaintances might not be able to escape. Since that was the case, they might as well fight with all their might. They might as well fight until the sky turned dark and the earth turned bright. Seeing that everyone finally had some momentum of unity, Ryuto clapped his hands and smiled. "It's decided then. After returning, calm down your subordinates. Tomorrow afternoon, we will begin the battle distribution plan and begin an all-out attack on the Heavenly Eye group. We must let the whole world see the backbone of the extreme Tao. Oh. Attack them. We must let the whole world see our backbone." Following Ryuto's adjourn, all the extreme Tao bosses in the Tokyo region walked back with their heads held high and chests puffed out to prepare for the next battle. Perhaps it would also be their last battle. In this battle there might be... No, there would definitely be a lot of deaths. But even so, no one wanted to retreat, because they couldn't retreat. After the meeting was adjourned, Yima came in front of Ryuto and said in a praising tone, "Since ancient times, the so-called extreme Tao is the aggregation of people who are free from society. Those who are isolated by society and have no place to stay, the extreme Tao will give them a place to stay. Ryuto also replied, and as the leader of the extreme Tao, what we need to do is to protect this place and become the power that the lonely people can always rely on. Is that right? That's right. You are now a more qualified and powerful extreme Tao than me. It seems that I really misjudged you back then. I'm very sorry. Although he was facing his own son, Yima still reached out and patted Ryuto's shoulder, and solemnly expressed the most sincere apology to him. Thinking back, Yima had always been unwilling to let Ryuto walk on the path of extreme Tao. He hoped that his son could live out his life as an ordinary person. Now it seemed that that kind of thinking was simply wrong. In just a year or two, Ryuto had already climbed to a height that even Yima couldn't reach. This was something that Yima never dreamed of. At this time, Ryuto also said to his physical father, "Next is the time to determine the winner. Pops, I will also take revenge for your wrongful imprisonment back then." Until now, Ryuto still remembered how Yima was imprisoned and how he was sentenced to 30 years in prison. There was no doubt that it was the Heavenly Eye group behind this. This was great. New hatred and old hatred, all paid off in one go. This time, Ryuto wouldn't wait for Ayam to use some dirty tricks to mess with him. Instead, he planned to take the initiative and completely eradicate the Heavenly Eye group. However, after hearing his son's words, Yima shook his head and smiled. "My hatred doesn't matter. The key is you. You are still young, and you still have 3 women. You must go back alive to reunite with them. Do you understand? Okay, after I finish this battle, I will go back and marry the 3 of them." In front of his physical father, Ryuto patted his chest and promised, as if he didn't notice that he just made a huge mistake. But so what? A true powerhouse dared to face a bloody life, and dared to plant a flag before going to the battlefield. Just like that, following the end of this unprecedented Tokyo-Kyoto conference, an unprecedented war slowly began to surge under the surface of the water. It had to be said that for this war, Ryuto and others would probably pay a huge price and be forced to give up a lot of things. What Ryuto didn't expect was that in the morning of the second day, the first thing he had to give up was also a phone call. Chapter 331. Ding-ling-ling, ding-ling-ling-ling-ling-ling-ling. The next morning, Ryuto, who was sleeping, was woken up by a phone call. Ryuto didn't lie down to rest until late at night because he had a lot of work scheduled last night. He didn't plan to go to school again, so he decided to sleep in. From the moment the Extreme Tao Expulsion Act was introduced, Ryuto no longer had the right to go to school. After all, according to the law, it was illegal for him, the leader of the Extreme Path Organization, to go to school. The principal of Dori First High School, Adolphe, was a good person and had taken care of Ryuto many times. Ryuto didn't want to cause trouble for him, so he simply stopped going to school and quietly cut ties with the other side. Who knew that Ryuto thought so, but the others obviously didn't think so. Hence, early in the morning, Long Do picked up the phone and heard Gao Yuan's unhappy voice from the other side. "Hey boss, something happened at the school." "The school? What happened?" "A bunch of bastards gathered at the entrance of the office building early in the morning to protest. They said they wanted to force the principal to expel you. Then ask the principal to expel me. But Headmaster Adolphe insisted on not expelling you, and he also refused to acknowledge the Extreme Tao Expulsion Act." Was old Master Adolphe that stubborn? Long Do's brows furrowed when he heard Gao Yuan's words. The reason why Ryuto didn't go to school himself was that he didn't want to be a burden to Adolphe, the staff, and the other students. However, if something like this happened, it would go against his wishes. "I'm on my way. I'll be there soon." After hanging up the phone, Ryuto immediately called for the fastest driver and rushed all the way to Dori First High School. At the same time, just as Ryuto was rushing here, a series of verbal sparring was going on in front of the First High School office building. Early in the morning, when everyone should have just arrived at school, a large group of students did not go to class. Instead, they ran to the office building where Adolphe worked and raised a large banner with the words, "Ryuto Kiryu get out, Extreme Hooligan get out," written on it. It wasn't as simple as just holding up a banner. Under the leadership of Yamato Tanaki, a young man with an overbearing expression on his face, they even shouted some insulting slogans in the direction of the principal's office. 3, 2, 1. Fire this damn hooligan, or get off the stage. Fire the damn hooligan. Otherwise, get off the stage. One more time. Fire the damn hooligan. Otherwise, get off the stage. Under the leadership of Watanabe, a group of students shouted their slogans vigorously. The scene looked somewhat intimidating. Upon closer inspection, almost all of the protesters were boys, and most of them were strong and athletic boys. They should be the ones who were humiliated by Ryuto at the first martial arts tournament. Watanabe, who was in charge of leading them, was even more influential. He was one of the culprits who was beaten up by Ryuto and thrown into the ICU, which led to the royal family breach incident. He was also one of the culprits who indirectly caused the death of Watanabe. Maybe it was because he was in the ICU, but after watching the Prime Minister's speech yesterday, Watanabe took full advantage of his family's tendency to cause trouble and brought a group of athletic boys to Adolphe. Just as this group of guys was protesting outside, there was also a chaotic scene in the principal's office. Principal Adolphe? Why don't you do me a favor and write an expulsion notice? Then this matter will be settled. Looking at a large group of students outside demanding the expulsion of Ryuto, a school board member could not help but wipe the sweat on his forehead with a handkerchief and said to Adolphe, who was sitting behind the principal's desk, "I've said it many times. That's impossible. I will never expel Tong Sheng." But Adolphe still shook his head and once again refused with righteous words. At this time, the old gentleman in a suit had a cold face and a serious tone. He was completely different from the usual old man who liked to dance. "Principal Adolphe, why are you so stubborn? Isn't it just expelling a student? And that is the Extreme Expulsion Act. You are just abiding by it. Didn't you teach law before? You should be very law-abiding." Seeing that Adolphe still refused to expel Ryuto, the school board member was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. "It is precisely because I am a law teacher that I cannot abide by the Extreme Expulsion Act, which is obviously abnormal. I have lived for most of my life, and I have never seen such a law trampling on the law." When he said the second half of the sentence, Adolphe could not help but sigh. As an old professor who taught at the Tokyo University of Law and Politics for decades, Adolphe naturally knew the laws and regulations like the back of his hand, but he had never seen such a shameless piece of garbage as the Extreme Expulsion Act. In particular, it involved a series of provisions that deprived the life rights of extreme Tao. It was simply shameless. Anyone with a little legal knowledge should know that it was completely unreasonable. Therefore, Adolphe was determined not to expel Ryuto, because it meant that as a professor, he lost to unreasonable power, lost to the shameless Prime Minister. But it was useless for Adolphe to think about it. Now the public's resentment toward extreme Tao had been mobilized. Looking at the tsunami-like protests outside, it was clear that it was no longer Adolphe's business whether to expel Ryuto or not. Unknowingly, more and more people gathered outside the office building, and the wave of protests was getting bigger and bigger. After all, Ryuto's reputation in the school was not too good, especially some of the boys. After learning that the bastard had a scandal with the two campus beauties, Yunyen and Colored Glaze, they saw him as the murderer of their father and wanted him to die as soon as possible. "Expel Ryuto! Expel Ryuto! Expel Ryuto! Extreme Tao go to hell! Extreme Tao go to hell! Extreme Tao go to hell!" Unknowingly, under the leadership of Watanabe, the protests were getting louder and louder, and the surrounding crowd was getting bigger and bigger. Some people even began to use their mobile phones to broadcast the scene online. The situation was getting more and more out of hand. Seeing that the situation was getting worse and worse, Adolphe could only go downstairs with a few school board members and teachers with resentment. He sternly said to the group of students, "Are you done?" "No." When the leader, Watanabe, saw the principal appear, he suddenly smiled and said loudly, "As long as you don't expel Ryuto Kiryu, we will continue to cause trouble." "Right. Yes. That little bastard Ryuto Kiryu has no right to study here. Let all the extreme Tao go to hell. A bunch of social trash. How can they be here? Expel him quickly. Then publicly apologize. Otherwise, you won't be able to continue being the principal. After seeing the old principal who had been working here for many years, the group of boys became more and more excited. Their voices became louder and louder, and some even began to use foul language and personal attacks. Quiet. Quiet. Don't make a ruckus here. The other teachers began to try their best to calm the students, but it was to no avail. Even Awatanaki, who was standing at the front, laughed and said, "Don't think that you can suppress this matter with your status, old man Adolphe. You are not worthy. This is the law that the Prime Minister is pushing. Does the Prime Minister know? Compared to the Prime Minister, you are nothing." Adolphe replied righteously, "No one can distort the justice of the law. Ryuto has the right to study here. This is my judgment as a law professor." Professor? So what if you are a professor? Give me some face and I call you a professor. If you don't give me face, you are just an old dog. Just as Awatanaki was pointing at Adolphe's nose and scolding him, he did not notice that the noisy voices behind him had quieted down. "Is that so?" At this time, Adolphe sneered, "You are now pointing at my nose and scolding to your heart's content. Do you dare to say the same thing to Ryuto when he comes here? Why not? Who does he think he is? A stinking hooligan. Everyone has the right to punish him." Pat pat. When Awatanaki was scolding to his heart's content, a hand suddenly reached out from behind and patted him on the shoulder. "Don't pat me, I am not done yet. That guy should have died a long time ago. If my sister was still here, Terusei Ryudo would be hanging on the gallows by now. His tongue would be hanging out of his mouth, and I would still be on top of his head." Terusei Ryudo's voice trailed off. Pat pat pat. Before he could finish his sentence, the hand behind him patted him on the shoulder again. After being patted for the second time, Awatanaki turned his head impatiently and scolded, "What are you patting? Can't you see that I am. In just a short sentence, Kawada Tamaki's tone changed from passionate to terrified. His face turned paler than a sheet of paper, as if he would faint at any moment. "Go on." Suddenly, Ryuto, who was standing behind Awatanaki, showed a relaxed smile and encouraged him, "What do you want to do on my head? Do you want to break dance?" Dragon. Brother Ryuto? I was just joking. Please don't take it seriously." The moment he saw Ryuto, the muscles on Awatanaki's face twitched, and he forced a flattering smile. His legs began to tremble violently, and yellow water stains even appeared on his crotch. However, Ryuto didn't even look at him. Instead, he walked past Awatanaki and came in front of Adolphe. "Ryuto, why are you here at this time?" "Principal Adolphe, I am here to deliver the withdrawal application. Please accept it." After nodding to Adolphe, Ryuto took out a small envelope from his pocket and handed it to the principal. Long Do had casually written this letter of withdrawal when he was on the way here. Although the handwriting was a little ugly, it was enough to convey the meaning of the letter. Chapter 332. Ryuto. Do you really want to do this? Looking at the withdrawal application in front of him, Adolphe's feelings were somewhat complicated. Without a doubt, Ryuto wrote the application at the last minute after knowing the situation here, in order to not make things difficult for Adolphe. Compared to Adolphe's appearance, he was actually very stubborn. He would probably rather resign than expel Ryuto. In this case, Ryuto submitting the withdrawal application himself was obviously the best solution. Adolphe didn't have to go against his beliefs, and he didn't have to be besieged by this group of stinky brats. Take it, after the matter is resolved. I will come back. Ryuto nodded, and forcefully stuffed the application into Adolphe's hands, but said in a very gentle tone, "Yes, after the matter is over, after the matter of the Heavenly Eye group is over, the completely unreasonable, extreme expulsion law will naturally be abolished. At that time, if Ryuto wants to continue studying, he can still come back here. But now is not the time. In this situation where war is about to break out, Ryuto can't continue to stay here. Otherwise, he will only cause trouble for Adolphe and the others. Adolphe naturally understood this, so he had to take Ryuto's withdrawal application and nodded to the young man who was both a student and a friend. Okay. Suddenly, Ryuto grinned, turned around, and faced the protesters led by Kawatanaki. The moment he turned around, Kawatanaki couldn't help but sit on the ground, and the hundreds of protesters also trembled. I have now submitted the withdrawal application. I am no longer a student here. Can you get out now? When he said this, although Ryuto had a smile on his face, his tone and eyes were not smiling at all. For a moment, the hundreds of people were silent. No one dared to say yes to Ryuto, and no one dared to say no to Ryuto. In fact, the group of students who came to protest were already scared silly. They could curse Ryuto Kiryu behind his back, but when he really appeared, they didn't even dare to fart. Nothing to say, right? Seeing this group of trash was scared into silence, Ryuto sneered. If you have nothing to say, then leave. If you dare to come here in the future, I will... Wait, I have something to say. Just as Ryuto was about to say, if you dare to come here in the future, I will twist your heads off, and then leave, a very familiar voice came from the back of the crowd. This voice is... Yunyen. When he heard the voice, Ryuto couldn't help but raise his eyebrows, revealing a somewhat surprised expression. And under the gaze of the protesting students and a large group of students, the second-year school beauty, Yunyen, walked with firm steps from the back and came in front of Ryuto and Principal Adolphe. It's Yunyen, great. Is she going to come over and scold this stinky hooligan? Almost all the students present knew very well about the rumors between Yunyen and Ryuto, so when they saw Yunyen appear, they couldn't help but show a look of anticipation. Especially Wakata, who once pursued Yunyen but was ignored by her, looked at Yunyen with the expression of seeing the Virgin Mary. He couldn't wait for her to scold this stinky hooligan on the spot and publicly draw a line with him. In many people's opinion, Yunyen would definitely fall out with Ryuto. After all, Ryuto has become a bug that everyone wants to beat up after yesterday's live broadcast, and Yunyen can't always stay with him like before. However, when Yunyen came in front of Principal Adolphe, she did something that everyone couldn't believe. She took out a letter from her pocket and respectfully handed it to Principal Adolphe with both hands, and said seriously, "Principal Adolphe, this is my withdrawal application, please accept it." Did I hear it wrong? The words that flew out of Adolphe's mind were also the words that flew out of the minds of the surrounding crowd. Yunyen. Wild geese in the moonlight? The third-year school beauty? She wants to submit a withdrawal application? Why is she doing this? What reason does she have to do this? After being shocked for 2 seconds, Adolphe quickly asked, "Wait. Student Yunyen, you're going to graduate in a few months, right? Why do you have to do this at this time?" Because this is the Extreme Path Expulsion Act that was issued yesterday. Isn't it written that all relatives of Extreme Path members can't enter the school? In order to avoid making things difficult for you, it's better for me to take the initiative to withdraw from the school. Relatives of Extreme Path members? Which Extreme Path member are you a relative of? Faced with this question that everyone wanted to know, Yunyen turned around naturally, reached out and hugged Ryuto's arm, and said with a smile, "Of course I'm Ryuto's relative, I'm his wife, he's my husband, and the father of the child in my belly, we're considered direct relatives." From a legal perspective, spouses are indeed considered direct relatives. But the problem is that Yunyen's speech just now was not inferior to a superbomb explosion, and it has already shocked everyone around to the point that their eyes almost popped out. What the hell? Yunyen and Ryuto Kiryu are married? And she's pregnant? Seeing the two of them leaning against each other and hearing the explosive speech just now, the group of boys who originally wanted to watch Long Do make a fool of himself couldn't help but feel deeply heartbroken. Some of them almost couldn't help but cry on the spot. Are you kidding me? They originally wanted to see the school beauty cut ties with this stinky pervert, but who knew that their relationship has developed to the point of having a family? And now they want to withdraw together. This was especially true for Watanabe, who had originally planned to continue pursuing Yunyen after Ryudo left. When he found out that the goddess in his heart had a bloated belly, his mouth was wide open, looking very comical, just like a big toad. Unfortunately, he would never be able to eat swan meat. Ha 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 ha. When everyone around was shocked to the point of vomiting blood, Principal Adolphe let out a burst of bold laughter, and said with a smile, "I see, then I wish the two of you a happy marriage, and when the two of you have a wedding, remember to invite me to the wedding wine. Of course, at that time, we will—" "Hey, what are you talking about? What do you mean by the two of you have a wedding? That's right, Yunyen, you can't run away." Just when Ryuto wanted to say, "When the time comes, we will definitely invite you, and there will be plenty of wine," not far away from the crowd, two familiar voices came from behind. Before the people around them could recover from the shocking scene just now, a voice rang out from behind them. The second year's campus belle, Komashiro Ruri, and the first year's campus belle, Saito Tagunia, also made their way through the crowd and stood in front of Ryudo, Yunyen, and Principal Adolphe. Very coincidentally, the colored glaze and Dunia also had a letter in their hands. These two. Could it be? Because this had already happened before, some of the quick-witted people already had their mouths wide open, and some even reached out to slap their faces, as if wondering if they were daydreaming. At the same time, the two ladies also came in front of Principal Adolphe, and they both handed over the withdrawal application in their hands. "Principal Adolphe, thank you very much for your care in the past 2 years. Well, my time here is relatively short, but thank you for your care. This can't be right." When Adolphe received the withdrawal application from Colored Glaze and Dunia, he was completely stunned. Just now, Yunyen wanted to withdraw with Ryuto because the two of them were a couple, and Yunyen was also pregnant. In order to support her husband, they naturally had to go through thick and thin together. But now, Colored Glaze and Dunia also did the same thing, which meant, "Hey, did the three of you discuss this?" Seeing this scene, Ryuto couldn't help but ridicule with a wry smile. From the beginning, Ryuto only planned to withdraw himself. He didn't think that Yunyen, Colored Glaze, and Dunia would also do the same thing. "We didn't discuss it." Colored Glaze shook her head, looked at the two sisters, and smiled. "It just happened that we thought of the same thing." "That's right, and if you're not here, there's no point for us to stay here. We have to see this group of disgusting people every day. It's really disgusting." While saying, Dunia glanced at the group of protesters who came with Konami and Tanaki with her sharp eyes. She bluntly described them as disgusting. Bang. 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 At that moment, among the group of boys who came to protest, there were countless heartbroken sounds again. The third-grade campus belle, Yunyen Suki. The second-grade campus belle, Colored Glaze Kanzaki. The joke of the first grade, Dunia Sai 2. These three campus belle each had a very stable fan base in Doichi First High School. It could be said that more than 90% of the boys were fans of the three of them. After all, their appearance and temperament were far from ordinary high school students, and they even surpassed the level of idols, so it was natural for them to be able to get so many people's support. But today, just as the hooligan Tong Shang Ryudu was about to leave, the three school beauties all said they wanted to leave with him. What the hell is this? It seems that your wedding will be very lively. Looking at the three beauties around Ryuto, Principal Adolphe couldn't help but show a teasing expression. "It's okay, just remember to come when the time comes. Goodbye." Finally, after shaking hands with Old Man Adolphe, Ryuto took his three future wives, passed through the crowd of heartbroken, crying, and screaming people, and walked out of Doichi First High School in a dignified manner. His departure marked the end of a legend. At the same time, it was also the beginning of another legend. Chapter 333. Oh, this is great, we don't have to spend time in school anymore. Just when the four of them left Dori First High School together and rushed back to the Rulon Group headquarters, Dunia stretched slightly with a refreshing smile on her face. For Dunia, if she had the time to go to school, she might as well spend it on cultivating her martial skills. Recently, Dunia had almost mastered the Saito Ryu Palea martial arts, passed down by her family. She was pestering Furamaki every day to learn his Furamaki Palea martial arts. It had to be said that Dunia was indeed a martial arts genius. In just a short year, She had changed from a useless person who couldn't resist when assassins tried to assassinate her to a powerful martial arts master. In terms of combat power, the current Dunya was very close to the demon child Sai-2 who was killed by Ryuto half a year ago. Although there was still a lot of difference in skills, with the monster-level LV5 physique, it was enough to crush a large number of opponents.
Is that so?
But after hearing Dunya's words, Yunyan said regretfully, "Actually, I still like to stay in school. I can get in touch with my classmates, and it's convenient for me to collect materials for my novel. But there's no other way." Compared to her own preferences, at this stage, it was obviously more important to support her husband. Yunyan couldn't let Ryuto leave school alone. If he had to leave, then everyone should leave together. At this time, Ryuto also reached out and held Yunyan and Dunya's hands, and sighed, "It's good to have you here. I swear, I will give you a chance to come back to school in the future. That doesn't matter, as long as you treat us better. Especially senior sister Yunyan, she's pregnant." Speaking of this, Dunya smiled and reached out to touch Yunyan's belly. Although there was no protrusion yet, Dunya seemed to be able to feel the existence of the little life inside. She also liked to reach out and touch it as if she was greeting the child in advance. Ahem. Just as Ryuto, Yunyan, and Dunya leaned together warmly, Colored Glaze, sitting opposite the three of them, coughed. Obviously, she was very dissatisfied with the atmosphere that she couldn't integrate into. "Let's talk about something serious. Colored Glaze, what are you going to do next?" Seeing that Colored Glaze seemed to have something to say, Ryuto also let go of Yunyan and Dunya's hands and asked in a serious tone. Since a few months ago, Long Do and Lu Li had already been in charge of different areas. Long Do was in charge of extreme Dao-related matters in the Black Hand Alliance. Lu Li, on the other hand, was responsible for the affairs of the Yota Crow Alliance. After a few months of hard work, the Iron Triangle formed by the Kanzaki clan, the Tsukujiri group, and the Sai-2 club has already grasped the absolute dominance of the Hagakure. Although they hadn't completely controlled the organization, as long as they were given a little more time, they would be able to push Kaneshiro Rui to the position of another Golden Heron. At that time, the organization would really become Colored Glaze and her daughter. In fact, during this period, Colored Glaze and Rui were also doing work in this area, but judging from the situation of the Tenmu group, the speed of controlling Yatsuki might have to be faster. So far, among the three Golden Herons of Yatsuki, Prime Minister Shinzo Tanagawa, who was in charge of politics, had already become Iam's man. He had become an enemy force. They had to find a time to get rid of him. Tsukujiri Kyoji, who was in charge of business, was originally one of Colored Glaze's own people. That left the last Golden Heron, who was in charge of religion, in an uncertain position. The leader of the religious circle was Japan's largest and oldest shrine, Ise Grand Shrine, the highest clergy, priest, Tokihara Miya. In the religious world, there was no one who didn't know about Tokihara Miyagi. He could be said to be the true leader of Shinto. Almost all large-scale Shinto celebrations would be completed by this old man who was now 100 years old. But because Ise Grand Shrine was located in Ise City, Mie Prefecture, and because Tokihara Miya was already old, it was difficult to see him in Tokyo. If they wanted to find him, they had to go to Ise City. I originally planned to slowly pull Tokihara Miya down, but now it seems that I should be more direct. Ryuto, please. Colored Glaze then nodded to Ryuto. No problem. Ryuto sneered. Let's go to Ise Grand Shrine and find the old man. If he's willing to give up his position, then it's fine. If he's not willing, then I can only wish him a long life. Living a long life was a blessing for most people. But for an old man who was just 100 years old, it was a real threat. Now that Colored Glaze and the others wanted to further seize the power of Yatsuki, they had to push Rui Miya to the position of Golden Heron. If that was the case, the Tokihara Temple would either retreat or die. There was no other way out. If it had been someone else, they might not have dared to kill the sacrificial master in a country where Shintoism accounted for 80% of the population. But Ryuto didn't care about that. If he really couldn't come to an agreement, He could even burn down the ISE Grand Shrine. Alright, then I'll leave it to you. Although Colored Glaze knew that it wasn't appropriate to deal with a 100-year-old man like this, it wasn't the time to care about this. According to the situation this morning, ever since Shinzo Tanagawa published the infamous Extreme Extinction Bill last night, the situation of the Black Hand Alliance, led by Ryuto, had become very difficult. Even if it was Ryuto, a notorious extreme boss, there were people who dared to protest against him and tell him to get lost. Needless to say, the other extreme hooligans in Tokyo were simply in the state of a rat crossing the street. This situation could be said to be a great blow to the morale of the underground world. If it wasn't resolved quickly, even a behemoth like the Black Hand Alliance had the possibility of collapse because all the extreme members couldn't live normally. Not to mention other things, just the fact that they couldn't go to regular stores to shop and couldn't take transportation was terrible. Although the underground merchants led by the flower merchant quickly found a way to buy necessities through the black market, it wouldn't last long. Once the black market was closed down, the extreme dojos would be in absolute chaos. So now they had to be fast. They had to counterattack before the extreme dojos were forced to the limit. Otherwise, the longer it dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for Ryuto. Then I'll go to Isa first. I'll leave the house to you guys. After nodding to Colored Glaze, Yunyen, and Dunya, Ryuto opened the car door and jumped out. Okay. This guy is becoming more and more inhumane. Looking at Long Do, who didn't even need to stop the car and left halfway to find a transportation to ISE City, Lioli couldn't help but sigh. After Ryuto left, Dunya asked, "Then what should we do now?" "The situation is a bit chaotic now. Just in case, it's better for everyone to stay together. Especially Yunyen, she can't leave our sight." Suddenly, Colored Glaze glanced at Dunya, the strongest combat power on their side other than Ryuto. Colored Glaze already had a good understanding of the dirty woman Tenmu Ayam. In this war, Ayam would undoubtedly lay her hands on Ryuto's 3 women, namely Colored Glaze. Especially after Yunyen was pregnant, she might accidentally become an important hostage. In this case, it was best for the 3 of them to stay together. At least with the protection of Dunya, the little superhuman, they would feel more at ease. Even if the Fighting Under the Heavens mercenary group came, they might not be Dunya's opponent. Hearing Colored Glaze's words, Yunyen chuckled. "It's great to be able to stay with you too. It feels like we're a family. We're a family. Don't forget, the one in your belly has to call us Mom in the future." Really, then he's so lucky. Not only does he have a good father, but he also has 3 good mothers. Thinking of this, Yunyen couldn't help but reach out and touch her belly, revealing a happy smile full of maternal aura. However, just as the family of 4 over there was going home happily, Ryuto, who flew away from the car, quickly found a corner where no one was paying attention and took out a small aircraft from the air. Deng 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 deng. Rogue stealth jet. Accompanied by the sound effect of Doryman taking out a new item, a small one-person jet about 4 or 5 meters long appeared in front of Ryuto, and this plane was also named Wallace by him. Although this small jet plane could only carry 1 person, it had a very special stealth flight system. It could be undetected by the naked eye and most radars during flight. And the most important thing was that this small plane was a prop purchased from the Krypton shopping mall. It could be stored in the prop bar regardless of the number. It could be taken out and used at any time. It could be said that it was very convenient. Of course, such a useful small plane was not cheap in price. The price of a single unit was 2 billion. Even with Ryuto's current wealth, he didn't dare to buy it casually. Boom! Rumble rumble! Take off! Wallace! Accompanied by the roar of the plane's engine, the small plane quickly flew forward from the dark corner of the street, and it turned into a phantom and quickly disappeared above the clouds. Generally speaking, from Yoto to ISE, it took at least 2 hours, but with the speed of the Wallace, Ryuto could reach the destination in less than 15 minutes. That was to say, from the time he went to the ISE Grand Shrine to the time he finished his business, it took at most more than an hour, which was quite fast. "I hope there are no accidents during the time I'm out." Especially Colored Glaze's side. When driving the small jet plane quickly toward ISE, Ryuto couldn't help but think in his mind. At the same time, he silently planted a flag. Chapter 334. The ISE Grand Shrine, located in ISE City, Mie Prefecture, was the most special existence among the more than 80,000 shrines in Japan. It was the leader of all shrines, and even the spiritual pillar of the entire Shinto religion. ISE Grand Shrine was not a specific shrine, but a general name for the surrounding 125 shrines. Among them, the largest inner shrine was dedicated to the ancestral god of the royal family, Amaterasu Amakami, and the outer shrine was dedicated to the Funksho Amakami. The main shrine worshipped Amaterasu Amakami was located in the center of the inner shrine. The main shrine was a forbidden area, isolated by several wooden walls. Except for the royal family members, no one was allowed to enter. When Ryuto quickly flew to ISE City on the Wallace and arrived at the ISE Grand Shrine according to the navigation map, he almost laughed out loud when he saw the so-called spiritual pillar shrine. What the hell? Was the divine palace serious? Looking down from the air where Ryuto was, the entire interior and exterior of the ISE Grand Shrine entered his eyes. It was rumored that the architectural style of the ISE Grand Shrine was derived from the rice warehouse of the Yayoi period in Japan. The so-called rice warehouse was naturally a place to store rice, which was just a small warehouse. Such a warehouse-type building was pitifully small when looking down from above, as if hundreds of small wooden warehouses were stacked together. The most interesting thing was that these small warehouse-like shrines had names such as Imperial Grand Shrine, Baron Sacrificial Shrine, Tsukuyumi Shrine, Takihara Shrine, Kajushi Shrine, and so on the navigation map. But in fact, when taking a closer look, it was nothing more than a mess of rice warehouses piled together. It felt like entering a strange wood art exhibition, which was simply a waste of the word shrine. Not long after, Ryuto found the main shrine of the ISE Grand Shrine in the sky. It was said that the shrine worshipped Amaterasu Amakami, and only the royal family members were allowed to enter the forbidden area. Looking down from above, he could see many tourists around the divine palace. However, there was no one around the main hall because tourists were not allowed to enter at all. They would be blocked by the clergy who worked here. Unlike other shrines, the security guards of ISE Grand Shrine are all policemen of the self-defense forces. This in itself shows that this shrine has a special political significance. No wonder its priest has been able to take over the position of Yatsuki Golden Heron for generations. According to what Colored Glaze said, that Takihara Miyagi should be in the main hall. Let's do that. The corners of Long Do's mouth curled up as he flew the plane towards the main hall. He even arrogantly stopped the plane above the wooden main hall. Crack. When the heavy Wallace landed on the wooden roof of the main hall, Ryuto could clearly hear a strange cracking sound. Therefore, he quickly got off the plane and put the small plane back into the prop space. Then, he flipped down from the corner of the roof and slipped into the main hall. When Ryuto slipped in, several clergy ran out of the main hall and looked towards the roof. What's going on? Did I just hear a cracking sound from the roof? Did something fall on the roof? Go get a ladder, I'll climb up and take a look. Just as the clergy were about to climb up to the roof, Ryuto quietly slipped in from the side of the main hall. The main hall was not big. After entering, one could almost see the end of it at a glance. In the middle of the wooden shrine filled with the smell of incense, there was a statue of the Amaterasu. However, the decorations around it were a little too boring. If it wasn't for the explanation, it would be hard to tell that this was the legendary king of shrines. However, there was no one in the depths of the main hall. The centenarian, priest, Takihara Miyagi was naturally not here. Strange. Is that guy resting today? Or? When Ryuto curiously walked behind the statue of Amaterasu Amakami, he suddenly stopped because he felt a slight cold wind coming from below the wooden floor in front of him. Creak. So Ryuto came to the floor and felt around. Then, he lifted it up and revealed a rock tunnel that led to the underground. So that's how it is. Is the main body of this main hall below? Above is just a decoration used to deceive others. What a joke. When Ryuto went deeper into the underground tunnel, he saw a huge double door at the end. The ancient-looking door was painted with vermilion red paint. In this dark tunnel, it looked particularly scary, like the door to hell. But of course, Ryuto did not care about this. He gently pushed open the door and walked in. What appeared in front of him was a huge inner hall. Yes, an inner hall buried in the ground. It looked dignified, but in fact, it was emitting gusts of cold wind. It was a clear morning, and the bright sunlight shone through the light gaps in the ceiling. Under the light, it looked like there were mirrors sprinkled with silver everywhere, illuminating the entire underground hall. And in the deepest part of the inner hall, there was a magnificent golden statue. Different from the Amaterasu Amakami in the main hall, this statue was actually made of pure gold, and its shape was also different. It looked very expensive. Around the statue, there were a large number of hand-carved wooden tablets. In front of the wooden tablets, there were a large number of offerings. The number of these wooden tablets was so large that in the inner hall, except for a 3-meter wide aisle, the rest of the space on the left and right sides were almost occupied by these things. Longdo took a closer look and saw that the wooden tablets were filled with the names of gods and gods. For example, Yujia Soul Control God, Cheong Zun, Sujio Wu Zun, Ebisu Zun, Jiaju Tu, and so on. Walking in here, it was like walking into a Shinto god exhibition. Almost all the Shinto gods' names were engraved on the wooden tablets. You finally came, Ryuto Kiryu. However, when Ryuto came to the depths of the inner hall, the old figure kneeling in front of the huge pure gold statue said without looking back. According to the information, Takehara Maejiu was very old, at least 100 years old. When he knelt in front of the golden statue, Ryuto didn't realize that this was a living person. He thought it was some kind of statue. This is the golden heron, Takehara Maejiu. Not bad, he does have the aura of a Shinto leader. Seeing the stooped old man slowly stand up from the cushion, Longdo walked over and said with a smile, "You seem to know that I'm coming." Although Ryuto suddenly appeared, Takehara Maejiu didn't seem to be surprised at all. He even casually greeted the leader. "Of course, I'm a person who gave my life to the 8 million gods. Naturally, I'm protected by the gods. How can anything in the mortal world escape the eyes of the gods?" When Takehara Maejiu stood up, Ryuto found that his body looked very thin, as if he would be blown away by the wind. However, his slightly turbid eyes exuded a strange aura. This was an old man who wore the traditional costume of Shinto and stayed in the underground hall where 8 million gods were worshipped. He seemed to be able to see through everything. When most people met Takehara Maejiu, they would have a feeling of being seen through and would even think that he was the messenger of the gods. However, Ryuto naturally wouldn't be fooled by him. Because in the rogue's analysis mirror, the old man's attributes were completely seen through. At this time, the personal attributes of this ISE Grand Shrine Priest were name, Takehara Maejiu age, 100 years old attributes, Wisdom LV4, Constitution LV4, Courage LV4, Insight LV4, Charm LV4. Amazing! Even from Ryuto's point of view, Takehara Maejiu was a top genius among humans. Years of religious life gave him a pair of eyes that could see through everything. This was directly reflected in the attributes of LV4 Insight. Extreme Superman, level of eyesight. Such amazing insight coupled with powerful wisdom and charm, coupled with a mysterious aura brought by years of cultivation, this gave Takehara Maejiu the ability to lead the entire religious world. And other than that, this old man was very cunning. After hearing Takehara Maejiu's pretentious words, Ryuto smiled and said, "When you say you're protected by the gods, are you referring to the camera installed at the entrance of the underground passage? By the way, which one of the 8 million gods is in charge of the camera?" In fact, when he came in from the underground passage, Ryuto had already noticed the camera installed in the passage. He just pretended not to notice it. Takehara Maejiu just said that he knew Ryuto was coming because of the protection of the gods, but in fact, he just saw it in advance from the camera installed at the entrance. Who was he trying to fool? After being exposed by Ryuto, Takehara Miegiu's eyebrows twitched slightly, but he still said without any expression, "Everything in the world is given by the gods, technology is also the same. Of course, it is the blessing of the gods." Ha 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 ha. When he heard this extremely shameless words, Ryuto couldn't help but clap his hands and said, "You religious people are really shameless. Anyway, it is the work of the gods, it has nothing to do with humans, right? You can say that, compared to the thousands of years of foundation of the gods, the short 100 years of human life is just a drop in the ocean. It is not worth mentioning. I won't watch the next debate without you. Forget it, since you know everything, you should know why I am here, right? Of course, you are here to take my life, that's all." Although he knew that Ryuto was here to take his life, Takehara Miegiu still showed a strange smile. Chapter 335. Even though he knew that Ryuto was here to take his life, Takehara Miya wasn't worried at all. In fact, he looked very relaxed. It was clear that he was prepared for this. Ryuto smiled and said, "I don't have to take your life. If you are willing to retire and give up your position, I can guarantee that you will live until you are buried." Retire and give up my position. Kanzaki Ruehue is really greedy. Not only did she steal Iwasaki's position with Tsukujiri Kyoji, she also wants my position? Takehara Miya couldn't help but sigh. It was clear that he had a headache because of that woman. It was clear that even though he had lived in the ISE Grand Shrine for many years, he had a thorough understanding of the outside world. He could even roughly guess Ruehue's plan. "Since you know, that's great. One word, are you going to give up or not?" "Give up? It's impossible. With just you, you don't deserve to make me give up my position." "Very good." Seeing that Takehara Miya rejected his proposal without any hesitation, Ryuto's mouth cracked into a cruel smile. However, before Long Do was ready to take the old man's head, Takehara Miya's right hand, which was hidden in his robe, quietly pressed a button. In the next second, the situation in the underground palace changed drastically. Rumble. In the blink of an eye, the floor that Long Do was standing on suddenly loosened. It was like magic that the floor suddenly moved to the side. Ryu Do, who had lost his footing, fell into the pitch-black trap under the cold gaze of Takehara Miya. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared from sight. Those who don't respect the gods will be punished for eternity. Looking at the pitch-black pit in front of him, Takehara Miya couldn't help but laugh. In the caves below, there were countless poisonous insects, snakes, ants, bees, and other poisonous creatures. These poisonous creatures would inject their toxins into the human body to cause paralysis, and cause pain so intense that the person would want to die, but would not be able to die even if they wanted to. Just as the Takehara Miyagi had said, below was the netherworld purgatory. Anyone who came to this underground palace to look for trouble would fall into the netherworld purgatory with just a flick of his finger. They could neither live nor die. It was because of this special mechanism that Takehara Miya wasn't afraid of the Supreme Emperor who came to look for trouble. He even felt lucky that he could kill him so easily. Shoo, next is that woman Kanzaki Ruehue. I have to teach her a lesson and let her know that my position as the Golden Heron is unshakable. Takehara Miya smiled as he watched the hole slowly being filled up by the movable floorboards that extended out from both sides. He then turned around and prepared to leave through the small path behind the statue to deal with Kanzaki Rui. Rumble. But at this moment, the floor, which was at least a meter thick, let out a burst of explosive sound. What? Takehara Miya's eyes suddenly widened. He turned around and saw a big hole in the slowly closing floor. At the same time, a palm pressed against his bald head. It was like the hand of a devil that had returned from hell, causing chills to run down his spine. Hey, what happened to the eternal punishment? It won't end like this, right? Takehara Miya turned his head stiffly and saw that Ryuto Kiryu, who had just fallen into the pit, was standing beside him with a happy smile. How is this possible? How did he get out of there? In an instant, Tokihara Miyazaki was completely dumbfounded. His previous appearance of a strategist and a demon-like intelligence had long since disappeared from his mind. One had to know that the vertical height of this cave was about 10 meters, and the surrounding walls had been specially treated. It was so slippery that it was impossible to climb up from the inside. One could only fall onto the soft cushion and be slowly poisoned to death by the poisonous insects that came from all directions. But Ryuto seemed to ignore the 10 meters of vertical height. It even directly shattered the hard movable floor that was at least 1 meter thick. Was this something a human could do? But now was not the time for Tokihara Miya to think about these things. The most important thing was, his head was still in Ryuto's hand. Tokihara Miya suddenly felt that the purgatory was very close to him, as if it was between the palm. After a moment, Tokihara Miya laughed dryly. That, Ryuto Kiryu-san? I think we should sit down and discuss this. Why did the great high priest suddenly become so easy to talk to? Aren't you going to send me to the netherworld purgatory to receive eternal punishment? No, that's just an adjective, a description. After feeling the displeasure in Ryuto's tone, Tokihara Miya swallowed his saliva and said obediently, Didn't Mrs. Ruehue want me to be the golden heron? Actually, I also want to retire recently. Why don't I do Mrs. Ruehue a favor? How about that? Very good. I like your current attitude. But even if you like it, you still have to go down to the netherworld. Before Tokihara Michio could react, Long Do had already taken out a rope that was usually used for climbing from the prop bar and wrapped it around the limbs and waist of the priest of ISE Grand Shrine. In the next second, Tokihara Miya's old body was pushed forward by Ryuto and flew into the hole that was just broken open. Hey! In an instant, the old priest's panicked voice echoed in the deep hole, and then there was a plop sound. There was a thick cushion at the bottom of the hole that was about 10 meters deep. It could ensure that people wouldn't die on the spot after falling down. Of course, it wasn't set up out of kindness. Rustle, 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 rustle. Zap, zap, zap. When Tokihara Miya's body landed on the mattress, he could hear countless tiny crawling sounds coming from the darkness around him. No way. As the palace lord of this underground palace, Tokihara Miyagi naturally knew what kind of demons and monsters were being raised in this cave. Those poisonous insects, snakes, ants, bees, and other poisonous creatures would not eat humans. They would only bite humans and inject their venom into their bodies, causing them to slowly die under the double torture of the venom and insect bites. That scene was extremely cruel. In the past, Tokihara Miyagi had personally witnessed the tragedy of falling into this cave many times. Every time, he would happily hope that the people inside would die a little slower. However, this sacrificial lord never thought that there would be a day when he would fall into this cave. Hearing the group of people quickly approaching him, Tokihara Miya's face turned pale with fright and he shouted, Help! Help! Ryuto Kiryu! Help me up! I'll agree to whatever conditions you have. Before he finished, the ropes that bound Tokihara Miya's limbs and waist quickly tightened and pulled him up. Before the poisonous creatures could reach the priest's body, Ryuto quickly pulled him up. Do you really agree to any conditions? Long Do looked at Tokihara Miya, who was about to pee his pants in fear, and asked him with a smile on his face. Tokihara Miya didn't dare to speak now, and he could only tremble as he replied, Yes, any conditions. But now I don't want to talk about conditions with you. I just want to see if the so-called 8 million gods really exist. What? What do you mean? Didn't you say that you are the one who gave your life to the 8 million gods, and naturally you will be protected by the gods? Since you are protected by the gods, then the poisonous creatures won't hurt you, right? What is this guy thinking? Just when Tokihara Miya seemed to understand Ryuto's intention, he saw Ryuto's other hand also stretched out a long rope and swung it like a whip towards the pile of wooden tablets not far away. Crash! As the rope swung, a large pile of wooden tablets with the words Shinto Gods engraved on them fell into the hole in the middle. Then, Long Do waved the rope a few more times and swept the large pile of wooden tablets into the hole in the middle, into the deep purgatory of the netherworld. After doing all this, Ryuto smiled and said to Takehara Miya, "Now, the gods you believe in are with you. Accept their protection in peace." "Wait. I still have something to say." "You can't." Before he could finish his sentence, his aged body once again fell into the cave below. Accompanied by a series of clanging sounds, he smashed into a large pile of wooden tablets and divine positions. This time, Long Do took the opportunity to retrieve the rope that was wrapped around his body. This also meant that the huge hole below was the life tomb of the priest of ISE Grand Shrine. Ryuto Kiryo. yen at hashtag. %*%yen at hashtag. Hashtag. When countless poisonous insects crawled over the wooden tablets engraved with the names of the gods and finally climbed onto Takehara Miya's body, the old man, who was stimulated by the intense pain, finally couldn't hold it in anymore and began to roar like a madman, cursing something that no one could understand. But not long after, the sound from the hole became weaker and weaker. Obviously, the owner of the hole had been paralyzed by the venom of countless poisonous creatures below, or his mouth was full of poisonous insects. What awaited him next was a purgatory that was 100 times more terrifying than death, being bitten by countless venomous insects and soaked in terrifying venom. Even if he had the protection of a large number of gods, it was obviously of no use. "Idiot, why didn't you just choose to retire and give up your position? I gave you face, but you don't want it." After taking one last look at the hole, Ryuto, who had just smashed the golden statue and was about to transport it away in batches, couldn't help but shake his head as if he was lamenting someone's recklessness. If Takehara Miya could still shout, he would definitely be furious when he saw Ryuto smashing the golden statue at this time. After all, this golden statue was passed down from the era when ISE Grand Shrine was built, and it was one of the most commemorative pure gold Buddha statues in the world. But under Ryuto's hammer, the golden statue that had weathered hundreds of years of wind and rain in the inner temple turned into a pile of gold. Then, Ryuto transported them away in batches on the Wallace. It was really a pleasant morning. When Long Do transported a large pile of gold nuggets to a mountain not far away by plane and lit a fire in the ISE Grand Shrine, he even sang happily when he enjoyed the rare beauty, although his singing was worse than crying. Chapter 336. For the people who worked or visited this ISE Grand Shrine, today was supposed to be a very normal day, just like the past hundreds of years. It was so boring. Not long ago, even the members of the self-defense forces who were responsible for guarding here began to snore slightly or stretch their bodies. In the self-defense forces, people regarded working in the ISE Grand Shrine as a lucrative job, because there was almost nothing to do here, and no one would cause trouble here. If you ask why, it must be because this was the greatest shrine in Japan. Unless someone was tired of living, or a foreigner who was even greater than the Japanese, no one would do anything out of line here. However, it was precisely in this everyday atmosphere that an unexpected accident occurred. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Flames. Scorching flames suddenly rose in the originally quiet air. Like a crimson dancer, they immediately surrounded the wooden main hall. The first to discover this situation was the clergy working in the main hall. Seeing that the shrine was on fire, several clergy hurriedly shouted, "Fire! Fire! Come and put out the fire!" While shouting, they also ran to the place where the fire extinguisher was placed, trying to put out the rapidly burning flames. Unfortunately, it was too late. The pure wooden shrine was the easiest thing to burn. At this time, the fire had already risen, and it was impossible to put it out with ordinary fire extinguishers. What was even more terrifying was that in addition to the main hall where the Amaterasu Omagami was enshrined, many burning fire bombs fell from the sky like rain, accurately landing inside the 125 shrines. Who threw it? How did they start the fire? Many guards looked up, but they didn't see any traces. It was as if the fire bombs fell from the sky and burned the ISE Grand Shrine to ashes. Just as the clergy and guards were desperately trying to put out the fire, on a hill not far away, Ryuto finally finished singing and was ready to start a small plane to transport the gold back to Tokyo. The gold taken from the golden statue weighed at least 1,000 pounds, and it was impossible to transport it back to Tokyo in one go. It had to be transported in several batches. However, the value of the gold was naturally worth it. It was a huge sum of money. However, just as Ryuto was about to leave in high spirits, he received a special call from an unknown number. Anonymous phone? Who was it? Not many people knew Ryuto's phone number, and most of them were his family and friends. The last time he received such an anonymous call was nearly a year ago, when Ayam called to threaten him to kidnap Dunya. It couldn't be that evil, right? Ryuto thought as he answered the phone. Unfortunately, it was just that evil. Hey Ryuto-kun, long time no see. The next second, a young and deep female voice came from the phone. Hearing her voice was like listening to the whisper from the abyss on a moonless night. There was probably only one person in the world who had such a special voice. Are you kidding me? It's this woman again. After receiving Ayam's call again, Ryuto shook his head first, then smiled. Miss Ayam. Why do you call me so suddenly every time? It's probably because I feel very excited when I think of your panicked expression. Then why don't you try to appear in front of me suddenly next time? I will definitely be very panicked. Try it. Good idea, but not today. I'm here to tell you a piece of good news. Good news? What good news? Suddenly, Ryuto frowned slightly because he knew that the good news from Ayam's mouth was definitely not something good. In fact, it was indeed so. On the other side of the phone, Ayam said leisurely, Colored Glaze Kanzaki, Yunyen Sakujiri, Dunya Sai 2. They are all your women, and they are now in the Rulong Group headquarters, and you are far away at the ISE Grand Shrine, right? So, if you want to send people to capture them, it won't be a threat to me at all. It was not that Ryuto wanted to boast, but in order to avoid a cliché female lead being kidnapped after the war between the two sides, he had already set up very safe protective measures in his home. Apart from the Dragon Fong Squad, the most elite team of the Rulong Security Company, who was responsible for keeping an eye on them 24 hours a day, even the anti-air missiles had been deployed. Even if Yongji were to throw missiles at them, they would not be able to threaten Lu Li and the others. And because of the Tsukujiri group joining in, Ryuto's technological level was now shockingly high. During this period, all kinds of military-grade equipment such as drones, sonar nets, automatic fire systems, and other military-grade equipment were carried into the house. The array was simply ridiculous. In this situation, Ryuto did not believe that Ayam could still use colored glaze and the others. If she had the ability, she could try and see who would be the unlucky one. However, even with such safe protective measures, Ayam's next sentence still sent chills down Ryuto's spine. I know you've set up perfect security at home, but will those things be able to stop the angry citizens? Hee. What? Angry people? Could it be? In an instant, the scene that happened in the Dori First High School this morning suddenly appeared in Ryuto's mind. Because of the Prime Minister's speech yesterday and the release of the Extreme Dojo Bill, since this morning, the entire Yoto's Extreme Dojo had been living in an abyss of suffering. Most people now believed that the weakened Hell Butterfly was sold by the group of Extreme Dojo living in the underground world in order to make money. The reason why the world became chaotic was also their fault. In fact, in this hypocritical country, many people lived in depression. They had all kinds of dissatisfaction in their hearts, but they dared not vent due to various practical problems. However, if a large target suddenly appeared, a target that all Japanese people could hit openly, then some people who were used to staying in the corner would jump out like a swarm of bees and vent their usual dissatisfaction on this target. The current Extreme Dojo was this target. Now the Rulong Group headquarters was the most conspicuous target. And Colored Glaze, Yunyen, and Dunya stayed in this most conspicuous target. The worst thing was that Ayam was obviously preparing to lead people to deal with this big target. Seeing that Ryuto suddenly stopped talking, Ayam on the other end of the phone couldn't help but laugh. Guess. If hundreds of people attacked your house now, what would the situation be like? Hundreds of people attacking the Rulong Group headquarters? Ryuto never thought of such a thing before, Colored Glaze never thought of it, no one thought of it. However, such a thing that no one had ever thought of actually happened today. A little bit earlier, just when Ryuto was burning the ISE Grand Shrine and throwing incendiary bombs to his heart's content. Outside the headquarters of the Dragon Group, a group of people with white bandages over their heads and large banners in their hands rushed in as well. Some of them were even holding megaphones. The Rulon Group headquarters was located in the depths of Komodachi. There weren't many residents living in this area, and it was usually relatively quiet. The plaque with the words Rulong on the doorframe was still shining as brightly as ever. But not long after Colored Glaze and the others returned home, a sudden crowd appeared. When the densely packed crowd of at least thousands of protesters surrounded the tightly shut door, the leading uncle raised his megaphone and shouted, "Scum of society! Extreme hooligans! Rulon Group headquarters, come out and apologize! Tongsheng's family, come out and apologize!" As his loud voice spread around, the group of people who followed behind also shouted, "Scum of society! Extreme hooligans! Rulon Group headquarters, come out and apologize! Tongsheng's family, come out and apologize! 3, 2, 1. One more time. Scum of society! Extreme hooligans! Rulon Group headquarters, come out and apologize! Tongsheng's family, come out and apologize! Again. Scum of society! Extreme hooligans! Rulon Group headquarters, come out and apologize! Tongsheng's family, come out and apologize! The loud voice was like a wave of sound, directly from the front door of the Rulon Group headquarters into the hall inside. In the spacious hall, Colored Glaze was holding a folding fan and sitting in the master's seat with a cold face. Sitting around her were the senior members of the Rulon Group, including Ima and Fujiki. I didn't expect that yesterday's incident would cause such a huge protest. This is troublesome. After hearing the tsunami-like protest outside, Ima couldn't help but sigh, and his eyes seemed a little gloomy. Although Tongsheng and Ima were extreme hooligans, they had never done anything to bully the weak, so they had never been subjected to this level of protest and cursing. For a while, they felt a little uncomfortable. He would rather face countless enemies' swords, spears, and sticks than face so many ordinary people's cursing. The feeling was really terrible. At this time, Advisor Fujiki also frowned and said, "This is troublesome. I didn't expect that yesterday's bill would cause such a huge impact." "Then what should we do now? We can't always hide like a turtle, right? We have to go out eventually. Why don't we go out and drive them away? It's just a group of ordinary people, they should scatter after scaring them." But if there is a conflict, wouldn't it make the image of extreme hooligans worse in the eyes of others? How can we drive them away without a conflict? Are we going to hide here and wait for them to leave on their own? Wouldn't that be too embarrassing? Just as the senior members of the Rulon Group were arguing, Colored Glaze, who was sitting in the master's seat, suddenly closed the folding fan in her hand, making a soft sound. In an instant, everyone also stopped talking and turned their eyes to the leader's wife, who seemed to have the ability to solve all problems. Chapter 337. No one knew when it started, but all of the higher-ups of the Rulon Group had become a state where they only followed Colored Glaze's lead. Even when Ryuto was here, they were used to listening to Big Sister Colored Glaze first. One of the reasons for this was naturally because Colored Glaze was the current wife of the group leader, unmarried. But the other was mainly because Colored Glaze had already used her own ability to convince everyone. Although she was only 17 years old, this girl's wisdom was 100 times better than the Rulon Group's old men who had lived for decades. No matter the situation, she could think of a solution to the problem. So when everyone quieted down, Colored Glaze ordered, "Consultant Fujiki, first connect the surveillance footage from the outside here. I want to see the specific situation outside." "That's simple. Do it immediately." Consultant Fujiki hurriedly arranged for people to deal with it. After a while, the team members each placed a few laptops on the table in front of the higher-ups. Because the situation of the Rulon Group headquarters was a bit special, there were many surveillance cameras installed inside and outside the headquarters. Through the surveillance cameras, the current situation at the door could be seen very clearly. Through the footage captured by the surveillance cameras, there was now a group of at least 1,000 people gathered outside the door. Under the command of a leader holding a loudspeaker, they were shouting something loudly. The worst thing was that this group of people seemed to be gradually increasing. There were constantly people rushing here from afar to converge and gradually surrounded the Rulon Group headquarters. Phew! What a headache! There are too many people. When they saw this scene with their own eyes, Ituma and Fujiki unconsciously held their heads. For a moment they didn't know what to do. After all, the current situation was very sensitive. If they didn't handle it well, it could cause a very bad chain reaction. Just when Colored Glaze was seriously looking at the screen, Ayam, who was on the other side talking to Ryuto, laughed and said, "What should we do? Should we expel them? If that's the case, it's very likely that a fight will break out. That's going to be fun." Ayam was right. If the Rulon Group couldn't hold back and confronted them, it would most likely turn into a chaotic battle. It wasn't that they were afraid that the Rulon Group would be at a disadvantage if they fought. The problem wasn't whether or not they would be at a disadvantage, but that it would give an opportunity to a third party. With the abilities of the elite members of the Dragon Group, if they really got into a scuffle with the people outside who only knew how to shout slogans, they would definitely be able to beat the crap out of them. However, that would only be playing right into the hands of the Metropolitan Police Department. Ever since the bill was announced last night, the Metropolitan Police Department had sent more people to keep a close eye on the Extreme Tau, led by the Dragon Group, and were ready to arrest them at any time. If they fought in front of the Rulon Group's headquarters, it would immediately give the Metropolitan Police an excuse to arrest them. Most of the Rulon Group's members, even Colored Glaze's group, might be arrested immediately. By then, they would be in big trouble. So fighting was out of the question. They couldn't even open the door. As soon as the door was opened, both sides would definitely fight. But if they continued to be in a stalemate, the group outside might do something even more extreme. For example, they would take the initiative to rush into the Rulon Group's headquarters, forcing them to fight even if they didn't want to. So if they dragged it out, they would just be waiting for death. So according to normal circumstances, Colored Glaze's group only had one way to survive, and that was to run away on the spot. Ryuto, Kuin, why don't you call your little lovers and ask them to run away? Whether it's over the wall or through a dog hole, there's always a way to sneak out. At most, you'll just lose a house. Or if you fly faster, you might even be able to rush back to the scene. Ha 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 ha. Because she knew that the situation over there was very difficult to deal with, Yongji on the other end of the call also mercilessly mocked Long Do, as if she was mocking a drowning dog that was about to fall into the water. Was the Rulon Group's headquarters just a house? Obviously not. Ryuto was born there, it was his home, and at the same time, it was the soul of the Rulon Group. It had accompanied the organization through decades of ups and downs. If he asked Colored Glaze's group to leave, the group of angry protesters would definitely tear down the headquarters. At that time, the headquarters of the Rulon Group would be gone. Their soul would also be gone. At that time, only a group of stragglers would be left, and their morale would inevitably be severely damaged. It was a dilemma. Even if Long Do returned, he might not be able to find a way to break out of this predicament. But even so, after Ryuto thought for a few seconds, he laughed at the phone. Ha 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 ha. His laughter was very relaxed and very sudden, but it made Ayam's smile on the other side of the phone suddenly freeze. What are you laughing at? I'm laughing at you. What are you laughing at? I'm laughing at you for underestimating my little lovers. You actually think they can't even handle such a small situation. Ryuto sighed as he spoke, as if he was sad that Ayam, this old enemy, had her eyes on the top of her head. Hearing this, Ayam still laughed. So you mean you believe they can solve the problem? Of course. Ryuto stretched and said casually, so I'm not in a hurry to go back to Yoto now, but I'm going to find a place to eat some local snacks, take a bath, and then go back slowly. I'm not in a hurry at all. Who's in a hurry now? You. Ah, what a pleasant day. Bye, Miss Ayam. Next time, if you have something to talk to me about, please come in person. I really want to see your honor. While you're still alive and kicking." After saying the last murderous sentence, Ryuto laughed and hung up the phone. Then he quickly flew back to Yoto in a small plane. What a joke. Although he said to Yongji that he wasn't in a hurry to go back, acting cool was acting cool. He still had to go back immediately. He couldn't risk Azurite and the others' lives just because he wanted to act cool. As for how angry Ayam would be after the phone call, Ryuto didn't want to think about it now. He just wanted to go back and see if Colored Glaze was done with the matter. So, how can he prevent the Rulon group from clashing with the protesters outside in this situation and drive them away? At this moment, after watching the surveillance for a while, Colored Glaze slightly stretched out her hand and touched her chin, and asked Fujiki next to her, "Consultant Fujiki, do you know this group of people who came to protest?" "People who protested? I don't know, they don't seem to be residents nearby, nor are they residents of Komodachi. They are all unfamiliar faces that I've never seen before." Consultant Fujiki had been here for decades. He couldn't say that he knew all the residents around Komodachi, but he could at least recognize 30 to 40% of them. But this time, none of the people who gathered at the entrance of the headquarters were familiar faces. They were all strangers that Consultant Fujiki had never seen before. Are they all outsiders gathered from other places? That's simple. This kind of group usually has a leader on the spot to command. After dealing with the leader and causing chaos in the group, these people will immediately scatter like birds and beasts. Hearing this, Yima also quickly looked at the screen and stared. Backbone? Is it the one who stood in front and shouted with a loudspeaker? Among the sea of people, the middle-aged man who was shouting with a megaphone was particularly eye-catching. If one were to talk about the backbone of the group, he would definitely be the first one to notice. No. However, Colored Glaze shook her head and sneered. How can the one who rushed in front be the backbone? The backbone of this protest is the hooded man hiding in the middle of the crowd, who has been pretending to shout slogans. Hooded? Putting on an act? And a man? How could she tell? After hearing Colored Glaze's words, everyone also quickly looked at the surveillance. In the vast crowd, they really saw a hooded man who was not very eye-catching in the crowd. Fujiki heard this and asked in confusion, "Big sister, how do you know that he is the backbone? Look around that guy. Are there 4 people who have been intentionally or unintentionally protecting him from 4 angles?" After Colored Glaze said this, everyone also looked towards that guy's side. They really did see that the people around him had been intentionally or unintentionally blocking the hooded man in the middle of the crowd, as if they were afraid that he would be squeezed to death. The most important thing is that the guy standing at the front shouting slogans is also intentionally or unintentionally looking in the hooded man's direction a few times, so he must be the leader. Attacking him is definitely the right thing to do. Yima also nodded, but said, "But even so, how are we going to attack him? It's not convenient for our people to go out." "It's okay. I'll go." Before she finished speaking, Dunia's petite body came out from the screen behind Colored Glaze. Then, she puffed out her chest and volunteered to take on this task. In this chaotic environment, to get close to the hooded man without attracting attention, Dunia was without a doubt the best candidate. Not only was she strong enough, but the most important thing was, she was short enough to not attract attention. Of course, Colored Glaze would definitely not say the last part of the description at this time. Instead, she silently told Dunia a few words and then let her out. Or open the door, let Dunia out. This sentence was not that nice to say, but it was the right thing to say. Under the gaze of Yima and the other Rulon group's higher-ups, Dunia's petite figure, who was wearing a hat that covered her conspicuous silver hair, nimbly jumped up. She arrived at the top of the 3-meter-high wall and quickly jumped outside. Coincidentally, there were also groups of protesters outside that were converging towards the gate, so Dunia blended in without feeling out of place. 10 o'clock position, 52 meters forward, first take care of the 4 bodyguards around him. At the same time, the voice of Colored Glaze, who was responsible for commanding, came from Dunia's Bluetooth headset. "Don't worry. If he can leave in one piece, then I'll write the name Dunia upside down." After looking at the 10 o'clock position, Dunia's emerald eyes flashed with a dazzling murderous intent. Chapter 338. For the hooded man who planned this protest, he couldn't help but feel a burst of joy when he saw the turbulent scene at the entrance of the Rulon group. Humph humph humph. Ha 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 ha. What Rulon group? What the strongest underworld in Japan? What Ryuto Kiryu? If I use a little trick, you will be blocked at home and scolded. You don't even dare to go out. At the thought of this, the hooded man felt energetic as if he was a dragon slayer, leading an army to resist the evil dragon. Speaking of which, the identity of the hooded man was the president of a social association, the Clean Day Association. This association's usual slogan was, "Purify Japan, for the sake of a blue and clean world." He even self-proclaimed himself as a purification warrior and led some protests everywhere. Because the slogan of this association was relatively loud, and they often went to places like chemical plants and unscrupulous enterprises to protest, they also gathered a group of members. They often ran around with banners, which was quite awe-inspiring for a while. But just last night, the behind-the-scenes financier who had been funding the Clean Day Association mentioned the Rulon Group, and said to the hooded man that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make the name of the Clean Day Association famous. Hearing this, the hooded man couldn't help but be overjoyed, and he quickly agreed. He began to gather the group members overnight to prepare for the protest the next morning. So this morning, the scene at the entrance of the Rulon Group headquarters appeared. Go ahead, go ahead. After the TV station or something recorded it, I will arrange for them to rush in and have close contact with the group of hooligans inside. Pfft. Ha 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 ha. Thinking of the conflict between the two sides in a while, the hooded man couldn't help but laugh secretly. After all, he was counting on this matter to be as big as possible. What? If they really fight in a while, what will happen to the members of the Clean Day Association? Are you kidding me? What does this have to do with the hooded man? In the heart of this president, the hooded man, his club members were just his chess pieces. Since they were chess pieces, then they should play their roles. As for whether they lived or died after playing their roles, he couldn't be bothered to care. The hooded man was even secretly praying that more people would die after the fight. In that case, their Clear Day Association would definitely be exposed on the news, newspapers, and the internet. At that time, their reputation would definitely be more resounding, and they would definitely be able to attract more ambitious people to join them. This way they could do more things, and the financial backer behind them would also give him, the president, more money. Money, money, money. It was all money. PFFF, PFFF, PFFF. Looking at the chaotic scene around them, they heard their own group of club members shouting, "Scum of society! Extreme hooligan! Rulon Group came out to apologize. Tong Sheng's family, come out and apologize." And other such slogans made the hooded man feel extremely comfortable. Their mouths were full of doctrines, but their hearts were full of business. The world was bustling for profit, and the world was bustling for profit. This was the reality. As for the rhetoric of the Clean Day Association about purifying Japan, the hooded man himself didn't take it seriously. It was fine as long as he could make money. Everything else was bullshit. Only an idiot would believe it. However, just as the hooded man mixed in the crowd was happily thinking about how much money he could make next, a petite figure quietly sneaked over here. Is it him? This bastard hooded man. Looking at the guy with a leisurely expression and pretending to shout slogans in the crowd, Dunia couldn't help but flash a trace of anger in her eyes. Beside the hooded man, there were 4 guys who were obviously different from the other protesters. They were stronger and more agile. With Dunia's strength, she could see that the 4 people were trained at a glance, and there were some bulges in their clothes. Obviously, they were hiding equipment such as sticks or sharp weapons. But it didn't matter. In the view of today's Dunia, this level of trash was just a group of clowns. So just when Dunia's figure broke through the crowd like a flexible fish and swam to the side of 2 of the bodyguards, the young lady of the Saito Club suddenly made her move. Her seemingly slender arm swung up and slapped the 2 people's chin like a whip. This action was very subtle and inconspicuous. Even the two people themselves didn't feel that they were attacked. But after this slap, they only felt a flash in front of their eyes, and their consciousness quickly blurred. They fell forward uncontrollably as if they were punched in the jaw in a boxing match. But Dunya wouldn't let them fall to the ground. Instead, she stuck the two people's hands and feet together like a fried dough twist. She forced the two unconscious bodies to stand up through the state where they acted as pillars for each other. After completing this side of the action, Dunya's body once again broke through the crowd with ingenious strength, bypassed to the other side, and did the same thing to the other two bodyguards. When it was done, 4 walls had inexplicably formed around the hooded man. 4 unconscious people were firmly stuck in the middle, but he didn't know anything about it. He was still thinking about the beautiful future. Just when he thought about taking the money and running to American to enjoy the world and find many blondes to drink and drink every day, a small palm had already stretched out from behind and directly pinched the hooded man's neck. Ha! The moment his neck was pinched, the hooded man only felt a chill on his neck as if a sharp blade was placed there. Someone wants to deal with me. The hooded man was obviously very clear about how annoying his job was. Otherwise, he wouldn't have asked the best members in the Clear Day Association to be his bodyguards. Sensing that someone was threatening him behind his back, the hooded man quickly reached out and patted the 2 bodyguards in front of him, seeking their help. Clap, clap. After he patted them, the 2 people in front of him did not respond at all. It was as if they had fallen asleep. No, it can't be. Why did he fall asleep in such a situation? Before he could react to what had happened, another small hand had already grabbed the hooded man's left wrist from behind. With a snap, the hooded man's wrist was broken on the spot like a matchstick. The intense pain stimulated the hooded man's nerves. He wanted to scream on the spot, but because his neck was being choked, he could only make some unclear sounds. Moreover, the hooded man's muffled cries were quickly drowned out by the surrounding scum of society. Extreme hooligan. Scum of society. Extreme Tao hooligan. His voice was suppressed, and no one could hear him. As the hooded man trembled in pain, the female voice behind him said coldly, "Don't move, or else I'll kill you." Although the voice sounded very clear and pleasant, the meaning of her words was self-evident. "I'll die if I move, I'll really die." From the situation where the woman behind him did not hesitate to break his wrist, if the hooded man moved, she would really kill him without hesitation. This was really not difficult at all. Seeing the hooded man's body stiffen, Dunya behind him whispered, "You're the leader here, and the surrounding people were called by you, right?" Huh? How did she know? After the truth was revealed, the hooded man instinctively shook his head. Snap. But at the same time as he shook his head, a crisp snap came from his elbow where his wrist was just broken. The pain was even more intense than before. Whoa. His arm was forcibly broken. The hooded man who had been pampered before had never experienced such terrible pain. He wanted to faint from the pain, but Dunya had been stimulating his acupoints with hidden power to ensure that this guy could always stay awake. After watching the hooded man twitch for 7 or 8 seconds, Dunya continued to ask, "Yes? Or not? If you're not, then you're useless, and you can die." "Yes. I'm the president of the Clear Day Association. I brought all the people here." Feeling that the palm on his neck seemed to be tightening rapidly, the hooded man quickly explained. "Really? You can bring so many people here, so you can definitely order all the people here to withdraw?" Withdraw. Hearing this, the hooded man understood who was holding him from behind. Is it a member of the Rulong group? Although from the perspective of the hooded man, he absolutely didn't want to leave with people like this. After all, the task assigned by the sugar daddy was not completed. Wouldn't it be a waste if he left? But even so, now that his life was still in the hands of others, the hooded man had to do this. So as the hooded man quickly picked up the phone from his pocket and sent a few text messages, the uncle who was holding the loudspeaker was stunned after seeing the message. "What's going on? The president asked us to end the meeting?" Forget it. Since the president had spoken, the uncle in front also picked up the loudspeaker and shouted, "Everyone! Everyone! The cowards of the Rulong group dare not come out. It means that we have won a comprehensive victory. Whoa, whoa, whoa! A comprehensive victory! A comprehensive victory! Since it's our victory, then this protest will end here. Everyone evacuate. Go back and prepare for the next protest." Huh? They're retreating? When they heard these words, some old members of the Clear Day Association also felt a little puzzled. After all, how long has it been? Didn't each protest last for a few hours before? Why did they declare victory and leave so quickly? But since the leader said so, some members around also began to evacuate, so they had to leave with the group in confusion. Only the hooded man and the 4 fainted bodyguards stayed in place. Chapter 339. Just like that, batches of people came and went quickly. A protest accident that could have caused a big incident came to an end. What's going on? Why did it end just like that? Looking at the group of excited members of the Clear Day Association, carrying banners and running away quickly by trams, subways, buses and other means of transportation, the reporters and police who rushed over after hearing the news were even more confused. What's going on? Originally, they received the message that something big happened at the Rulong Group headquarters, but they didn't expect it to be over as soon as they arrived. There wasn't even a splash. At the same time, the hooded man, who was taken along with a group of bodyguards to a corner not far away, smiled bitterly. I have withdrawn all the people as ordered. Can you let me go? Get lost. If I see you again, it won't be as simple as breaking a hand. Yes, I won't dare to do it again, I won't dare to do it again. Seeing that the stinky brat behind finally let go of his hand that was strangling his neck, the hooded man hurriedly rejoiced in his heart, but on the surface, he kept begging for mercy with a bitter face. But just as he hurriedly ran a few steps towards the street in the distance, he scolded in a low voice without turning his head back, "I won't dare to do it again. My ass, next time I will definitely take your lives." For today's encounter, although the hooded man pretended to be in fear and trepidation on the surface, his heart was already filled with hatred. Isn't that right? The task arranged by his sugar daddy was not completed, and his wrist and elbow were also broken. It would be strange for a guy like the hooded man, who originally thought highly of himself and had a dark mentality, to be able to stand it. Kill them. I must kill those scumbags from the Rulong group. No matter what means I use, I must kill them, 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 kill them. After hurriedly returning to the Clear Day Association headquarters building and finding a doctor to treat his arm, the hooded man with a plaster cast sat on the office chair, but he kept repeating those 2 words. How should I describe it? This scene looked a little terrifying. He was like a mental patient, repeatedly saying, "Kill, kill, kill." Coupled with the gloomy expression on his face, it really made people wonder which hospital this kid had sneaked out from. Ring, 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 ring. However, when a phone call came in, the hooded man jumped up from the table in fright and quickly reached out to pick up the phone. Hello. I'm very sorry. The moment he picked up the phone, the hatred on the hooded man's face disappeared without a trace. All that was left was fear. At the same time, the hooded man immediately began to carry out the fine Japanese tradition of apologizing, an insincere apology. Because he knew who the caller was, and he also knew the purpose of the call. A moment later, a cold male voice came from the other end of the phone. The male voice sneered and said, "Humph, your apology is very efficient. If only you could do things so efficiently." Obviously, the man on the other end of the phone already knew that the hooded man's mission had failed. After all, this kind of thing couldn't be hidden. "I'm sorry. Because the situation this time was special. I promise it won't happen again. Next time? You wish. There won't be a next time. Bye-bye." Huh. The moment he heard the words coming from the phone, the hooded man only felt numbness on his back, and a cold current shrouded him from head to toe. Kwang dang. Because of excessive shock, he couldn't help but throw the phone in his hand away. He quickly planned to run out of the office. Go, find a place to hide, boom. But before the hooded man ran 2 steps, the bomb buried in the office had exploded with a bang, blowing the president of the Pure Sun Association and a large pile of black materials into a pile of unknown objects. Damn, it's over. At the same time, on the other side, Colored Glaze, who was eavesdropping on the hooded man in the Roulon Group headquarters, had to put down the headphones and rubbed her ears that were itchy from the explosion just now. What? Something happened over there? Seeing Colored Glaze put down the headphones, Dunia, who was sitting and drinking vodka, leaned over and asked. Don't get so close. Colored Glaze pushed Dunia away with a look of disgust, and said in disgust, You smell of alcohol all over, and you're so drunk. TSK. After being pushed away by Colored Glaze, Dunia couldn't help but complain, You drank a lot that night, what qualifications do you have to say? You. Forget it, let's talk about business. The guy you just put the bug on has now turned into ashes. All the clues are gone, and this game is over. Speaking of this matter, Colored Glaze waved her hand and put on a "that's it" gesture. The reason why Dunia let the hooded man leave was mainly because she had secretly put a bug and a tracker on him. Colored Glaze wanted to see if she could use that guy as bait to catch a big fish. Who knew that just as the hooded man returned to his headquarters, he disappeared in the blink of an eye with a phone call. What else could Colored Glaze say? Another bomb. Then it must be the work of the Minister of Arms, Nikolai. Ryuto said that he is the world's #1 bomb genius, an explosive monster. After hearing Colored Glaze's description, Dunia frowned and remembered the situation she saw in Moscow. Speaking of bombs, anyone familiar with the Heavenly Eye group would immediately think of the Minister of Arms, Nikolai, who was skilled in this field. Nikolai, who came from the KGB explosives team, was proficient in all types of bombs and could be said to be the best in the world in this regard. It was said that he could secretly place a bomb anywhere and send unlucky people who didn't know about it to hell. It was clear how good Nikolai was at playing with bombs. Humph. But Colored Glaze coldly snorted. If that Nikolai was really that good, he would have just killed us with a bomb. Why would he have to beat around the bush? Boom. Before Colored Glaze could finish her sentence, a loud explosion came from outside the room. Dunia, who reacted in time, quickly pounced on Colored Glaze and pinned the little jinx to the ground. No. It can't be. Since when did my words become so effective? After being pinned to the ground by Dunia, Colored Glaze couldn't help but look outside with her mouth wide open. But a few seconds passed and there was no other movement in the courtyard outside. What's going on? Wasn't it a bomb? Then what was the loud explosion just now? Crash. Just when Colored Glaze and Dunia were confused about the situation just now, along with the sound of the door being pulled open, Ryuto's figure suddenly rushed inside. That's right, it's Ryuto. Ryuto is back. The explosion in the distance just now was actually caused by him forcibly stopping the Wallace in the courtyard, causing the jet's nozzle to suddenly hit the ground, resulting in the loud explosion. It had nothing to do with the bomb. The reason why Long Do hurried back was naturally because he was worried that something might have happened to his little lovers. If something had happened to them, he would have to seize the opportunity to commit suicide as soon as possible. That was why he hurried back. But what Ryuto didn't expect was that when he pushed open the door of his room, he saw Colored Glaze and Dunia lying on the ground together. Colored Glaze even reached out and hooked Dunia's neck. Of course, Dunia pounced on Colored Glaze to protect her, and Colored Glaze hooked Dunia's neck to make it easier to get up. In fact, there was nothing special. However, Ryuto saw such a scene as soon as he opened the door. It was somewhat speechless, especially when these two just acted like sisters in front of Ryuto not long ago. For a time, the three of them stared at each other, and the scene suddenly turned green. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I hurriedly rushed back to see if anything had happened to my harem, but I ended up seeing such a scene? This isn't good, right? Suddenly, Ryuto felt like his head was covered with green grassland, and there were hundreds of grass-mud horses tap-dancing on it. Colored Glaze first looked at Ryuto, who was surprised, then looked at Dunia, who was still lying on her, then got up from the side and shouted to Ryuto, "Wait. No matter what you are thinking, you have misunderstood. It's not like that. What's going on? What's going on?" Dunya, on the other hand, tilted her head foolishly, as if she hadn't realized what Long Do was thinking. "It's the matter of us pretending to be Yuri before. Why did you hiss?" Seeing that Dunya, this idiot, still didn't understand, Colored Glaze also quickly reminded her, but halfway through her words, she wanted to slap herself because she actually leaked some important information in front of Ryuto. Oh. After hearing this, Ryuto's originally tense face suddenly relaxed, and then he revealed a meaningful smile. "Aya, so that's how it is. You were acting before, so good at acting." He came in front of Colored Glaze, lowered his head, and laughed in a teasing tone. Actually, before this, Ryuto thought that Colored Glaze and Dunya were really together, but now that Colored Glaze accidentally revealed that it was all an act, then the sky was already bright. "Great, so my harem isn't Yuri, now I don't have to worry about being cast aside." Seeing the wretched smile on Ryuto's face, Colored Glaze's pretty face instantly turned red, but she still crossed her arms, forced her chin up and said angrily, "Now is not the time to talk about this. How is the situation on your side?" "Takihara Miya, he..." Beep. Just as Colored Glaze was about to ask Ryuto about the results of the trip, the latter smiled and turned on the TV, and the TV was broadcasting an emergency news. The news about ISE Grand Shrine being attacked by fire and turned into ashes. Chapter 340. According to reports, not long ago, Japan's most famous ISE Grand Shrine had an unknown fire. The merciless flames engulfed more than 100 shrines nearby, and the fire burned the entire sky. On the emergency TV program, the host used a mournful tone and expression to describe the situation. On the screen, there were many scenes of firefighters trying to extinguish the fire. After watching the program, Colored Glaze didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "You're really capable. I asked you to destroy the Takihara Miyako, and you destroyed the entire ISE Grand Shrine. You're really good at demolishing houses." "Can't help it. That old man didn't know how to appreciate kindness. Plus, that place was unpleasant to look at, so I just destroyed it." Although he did such a big thing, Ryuto still looked happy and content. He didn't seem to realize that he had just destroyed the spiritual pillar of the Shinto sect. "Phew, this is great. Yatsuki must be in an uproar right now." But compared to Ryuto, who only cared about having fun, Colored Glaze was thinking about what they should do next. With the death of the third golden heron, Takihara Miyako, the current Yatsuki, was dominated by Kyoji and Jin-san. Plus, the Kamiyoshi clan had the absolute advantage in the Dark Crow level. It shouldn't be a problem to push Rue Hui to the position of golden heron. What's more, when the Takihara Miyagi also died, the other factions that were watching also understood that this was definitely the doing of the Kamikaze clan, so their fear of them increased by several degrees. From Iwasaki to Takihara Miyako, the Kamiyoshi clan had already killed 2 golden herons. This was a situation that hadn't happened in a long time. It was enough to show how powerful they were. The Japanese were all strong. When you were stronger than them, they would kneel down and be your dog. This situation was common in all classes. Just as Colored Glaze was thinking about how to threaten those guys, Rue Hui called. Colored Glaze went out to discuss the countermeasures with her mother. At this time, only Ryuto and Dunya were left in the room. The latter also ran over with great familiarity and sat on Long Do's lap with her 200-kilogram little butt. If it were an ordinary person, their thigh bones would have been crushed when they sat down. But Ryuto completely ignored her abnormal weight. He even easily hugged the little bear's slender waist and smiled. "What's wrong? I haven't been with you recently. Are you lonely?" "Who's lonely?" "Well, a little." Although Dunya looked like a tsundere, she was actually quite honest. She immediately admitted her feelings. Seeing her cute appearance, Long Do couldn't help but hug this little bear and play with her for a while. But not long after, Lu Li ran in again. Hey, you two. Do you think I'm dead? Looking at the two people lying on the sofa, Lioli couldn't help but cover her face and complain. Sister Colored Glaze, if you want to play, you can come over, I don't mind. At this time, Dunia was lying lazily on Ryuto's thigh. Her little head was resting on the armrest of the sofa. Her feet in white pantyhose were raised high. She looked very annoying. Furthermore, from her current position, one could see her perfectly flat body from her neck to her abdomen. It was simply enough to make one want to cry. Are you an idiot? Who wants to go with you? Colored Glaze raised her eyebrows and replied in a disdainful tone. Well, Brother Ryuto, if she doesn't want you, then accompany me tonight, hee. After hearing Colored Glaze's words, Dunia wrapped her arms around Ryuto's neck and said to him in a sweet tone. Although Dunia usually doesn't have such a spoiled personality, it doesn't prevent her from acting in front of Colored Glaze. If she can make Colored Glaze angry, that would be great. Ryuto, who knew this, also cooperated and raised Dunia's chin. He said to her with a weird expression, Okay. Cute little Red Riding Hood. I'll eat you tonight, awoo. So scary. There's a big bad wolf. He, it's too late to find out now. You can't escape from my evil clutches. These two fellows must be sick in the head. Looking at Ryuto and Dunia who suddenly quarreled on the sofa, Colored Glaze couldn't help but sigh. But in her heart, there was a slight trace of envy. After all, for the proud Colored Glaze who is used to hiding her emotions, she envied Dunia's personality of being able to say anything openly, but she couldn't do it no matter what. Just like this, the somewhat exciting and somewhat depressing day quickly passed. That night, on the top floor of Unfettered Sky Tower, in Tenmu Iam's office, a tall and slim figure was holding a cup of scarlet-red, Bloody Mary, and looking at the scenery in the distance. Unfettered Sky Tower, built on the artificial island in the middle of Tokyo Bay. Looking around from the top of the tower, which was 666 meters high, one could completely overlook the huge bay below, as well as the row upon row of buildings in Tokyo. Usually, when she had nothing to do, Iam liked to hold a cup of Bloody Mary, mixed with 96 degrees of water of life, and stand on the balcony behind the office, carefully looking at the world that was about to burn into a sea of fire. But tonight, Iam's mood was obviously not very good. The corner of her sharp eyes slightly raised by 2 degrees. This was the decisive evidence that the head of the Tenmu clan was in a bad mood. Knock knock. At this moment, there was a series of knocks on the door of the office, and Iam said in a cold tone, Come in. Yes. As the door was pushed open from the outside, the head of the Ministry of War, Nikolai, appeared in front of Iam with a somewhat panicked young man. You're on your own. When the young man was brought in, Nikolai patted him on the shoulder slightly, obviously already thinking about what might happen in a moment. The young man immediately trembled, and then hurriedly came in front of Iam and kowtowed on the ground. It had to be said that the young man's kowtowing posture was very standard. He knelt on both knees, leaned forward, lowered his head, and put his hands flat on the ground, fingers touching each other. It was perfect. Even if a Japanese kneeling master was to demonstrate, it was unlikely that he could do a more standard kneeling posture than the young man. However, although the young man's kneeling posture was very standard, Iam's eyes were still as cold as ice. At the same time, Iam smiled. Her eyes didn't smile, but her red lips parted at the same time. The curve of her eyes also curved, like a small crescent moon. It was very beautiful. But even with such a beautiful expression, Nikolai, who was not far away, felt his hair stand on end. It's over. I shouldn't have brought him here. It's better to let him commit suicide earlier. Now that he's in trouble, it's probably difficult for him to die a good death. Looking at the subordinate who was in charge of the affairs of the Clear Day Association not long ago, but because of a moment of negligence, he did not personally command the protest this morning, causing the protest to fail, Nikolai's gaze also changed significantly as if he was looking at a dead person. Lord Yongji was very unhappy today, and the reason was the protest of the Clear Day Association this morning. Yongji had purposely called Ryudu, wanting to see Ryudu Tongshang's face turn pale with fright when he found out that his home had been invaded. Who would have thought that she would be the one being checkmated instead? Now, the plan has completely failed, and Lady Iam is very unhappy. Then, someone will definitely have a hard time. No, someone will have a hard time. Raise your head, bow, or kowtow, this is useless to me. You should know it in your heart. At this time, Iam came to the young man with a wine glass and said in a condescending tone, "In Iam's view, Japanese people have a bad habit, that is, they like to make unnecessary apologies. Apologies are meaningless in itself. If he had really done something wrong, he should think of a way to make it up to her, not just bow and kowtow and pretend that nothing had happened." The young man who came to apologize understood this principle. Kowtowing alone as an apology was not sincere, so he decided to do something more sincere. Zing! So in the next moment, the young man took out a sharp dagger from his waist and chopped his index finger. Zap! With a burst of blood spurting out, the finger was severed at the base, dyeing the carpet below red. The young man endured the severe pain and said with sweat on his face, "Young Lady Iam, is this okay?" Looking at the blood flowing on the ground, Iam smiled and said, "Oh, chopping your finger, I haven't seen such an ancient way of apologizing for a long time. If Lady Iam feels that it's not enough, I can continue to chop, even chop a few fingers." While saying this, the young man continued to pick up the dagger and hung it in the air, waiting for Iam's order at any time. Although chopping off his finger is very painful for him, as long as he can make Iam calm down, as long as he can continue to live, the finger is not chopped off in vain. After feeling the young man's sincerity, Iam nodded and said gently, "Seeing that you are so sincere, I will forget about this dereliction of duty, and I will no longer pursue it." The young man was overjoyed when he heard this, and he quickly continued to kowtow and thank her. "Thank you for your magnanimity, Lady Iam. Then I will. Don't be in a hurry to leave." Seeing that the young man was about to leave, Iam showed a big smile and said, "Next, we should settle the score. You dirted the carpet in my office." Huh. Hearing this, the young man's face turned green. Ah. A few seconds later, his body flew out of the balcony of the 666-meter-tall unrestrained sky tower with a miserable cry, until he fell into the water and became a pile of minced meat. Chapter 341. Looking at the young man under the Ministry of War, jumping down from the balcony that was more than 600 meters high. Nikolai's mouth twitched, and then Iam shooed him out of the office like a dog. After leaving the office, Nikolai couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief, as if he had received a great favor. Monster, the boss is really the most terrifying monster in history. For Nikolai, who was a KGB agent, has been accustomed to all kinds of killing scenes and all kinds of ruthless people since he was a child, this was the first time in his life that he used this kind of evaluation on someone. But in fact, Amami Iam is really such a monster outside the norm. The vast majority of people always had a motive when they did all kinds of evil things, such as murder, arson, robbery, theft, fraud, and so on. Most of them didn't do it for the sake of doing it, but to get something. Therefore, no matter how many people are killed, no matter how cruel the method is, as long as there is a reason behind it, Nikolai will not think of her as a monster. But the problem was that when Atema Haim was doing all kinds of evil things, she didn't seem to have any ulterior motives. She really did it because she wanted to do it. This level of malice was much more terrifying than those homicidal maniacs who killed for pleasure, because homicidal maniacs at least did it for pleasure, but Yong-ji didn't even do it for pleasure, but because she wanted to kill. Doing evil is equal to breathing. Doing evil is equal to eating. Doing evil is equal to life. This woman is like a strange creature soaked in the most poisonous water. The malice in her heart has reached the level of divinity, in Nikolai's view. It is simply impossible for mortals to understand. There should be no one in this world who can empathize with Iam. If there is, this guy must be very sick. After lighting up a cigarette, Nikolai slowly relaxed his nerves and walked toward the landing pad of the unfettered sky tower. At the same time, another woman, under the boss's summons, entered the office where a murder happened. Sama, you're looking for me? Because she was suddenly called in by the head of the security department, Tajima Rinka was still wearing her police uniform, which made her figure seem out of place in the office. When Young-ji saw her favorite right-hand man, she was silent for a while. Then, she took out the phone that she called Lu Zhou today and played the recording of the call. He, ha 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 ha. What are you laughing at? I'm laughing at you. What are you laughing at? I'm laughing at you for underestimating my little lovers. You actually think they can't handle such a small situation. Ah, what a pleasant day. Bye-bye, Miss Youngji. Next time, if you have anything you want to talk to me about, please come in person. I really want to see your honor, while you're still alive and kicking. This. Ryuto, couldn't that guy dare to talk to Sama like this? After listening to the recording played by Sama, Rinka felt numb all over. Obviously, she was shocked by Ryuto's audacity. Who is Tenmu? She is the kind of monster that if you talk to her nicely, she might laugh and pull your head off. Ryuto, this guy, he even taunted and threatened her on the phone? So far, Rinka hasn't seen an idiot who dared to talk to Sama like this for a long time. Those rare people who dared to provoke the Tenmu group all ended up in an extremely miserable state. Ryuto, oh Ryuto, even if you want to die, you don't have to do it like this, right? Is Sama someone you can provoke? So at this moment, Rinka's forehead couldn't help but drop a few drops of cold sweat, and she silently scolded the idiot who spoke without thinking. Just as Rinka was silently scolding Ryuto in her heart, suddenly said, Rinka, you seem to have some friendship with Ryuto Kiryu. I think you even spent the night with him in France. Hearing that Sama actually started to talk about the incident where she spent the night with Ryuto in Paris, Rinka's body trembled slightly, and she quickly explained, it is because his girlfriend, Yunyen Tsukimi, is my cousin, so Then what do you think of his ability X? Can it satisfy me? I definitely have no intention of not being loyal to Sama. Huh? Originally, Rinka thought that would vent her anger on her, but who knew that she suddenly asked such an earth-shattering question? Wait, I need to calm down. Rinka heard the words and took a deep breath. She reached out and pinched her thigh that was wrapped in flesh-colored stockings, and then asked, are you referring to Ability X? Is it that kind of ability? Of course. Didn't you stay with him for a night? You should have roughly figured it out. Although Rinka was usually the kind of person who didn't need to close the door, but when facing Sama's question, she couldn't help but blush. After holding it in for a few seconds, Lin Hua said in a complicated tone, very powerful. Even 3 to 5 ordinary women are not his match. As for whether he can satisfy Lord Yongji, that is hard to say. That's true. Nodded and smiled. I have never looked for a man, and I don't know how to be satisfied. Until now, had no interest in men, and Rinka knew this. So she asked carefully and curiously, Sama, why did you suddenly ask this question? Regarding this question, didn't even think for a second. Instead, she straightened her back and replied, because I am in love, so I want to know about my lover. This is a matter of course. What? You are in love? Then the man is Ryuto Kiryu? That's right, he is my lover, so naturally, he needs to have the ability to satisfy me. If he doesn't have it, I will replace his 3 meals with supplements. Or simply catch him for surgery. Isn't that a good idea? As if she didn't care about Rinka's eyes that were about to pop out of their sockets, said some very scary things in front of her without any hesitation. It was completely unlike what a woman in love would say. Generally, after a woman fell in love, I really want to know about him. What does he like to eat? What are his interests and hobbies? What do I have to do to make him like me? After fell in love, is his ability X strong enough? If not, I will catch him and feed him medicine, or do surgery. Anyway, he must be able to satisfy me. This was definitely not a normal relationship. Absolutely not. At this time, Rinka was sweating while silently complaining in her heart. In fact, Rinka herself was abnormal enough. If even she felt that it was abnormal, then it was really super abnormal. It was so abnormal that it was difficult to understand. Finally, Rinka couldn't help but ask, "That, Lord Iam? Why did you suddenly fall in love with Ryuto? Because he's the first man that I'm interested in? This must be liking him, right? It seems so, but it seems not. You like him, but do you think he will like you?" Speaking of this, Rinka couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. Iam's brain was abnormal. This was no secret. She would fall in love with Ryuto, who had been against her for a long time, and today, she even ridiculed her. Although this was ridiculous in Rinka's opinion, it was also quite in line with the style of this lord who often went crazy. But the problem was that Iam seemed to have fallen in love with Ryuto, but Ryuto would never like her. Rinka was sure of this. According to Rinka's understanding of Ryuto, he was the kind of person who had a very tough character and an unusually firm attitude. No one could force him to do things that he didn't want to do. Previously, the Heavenly Eye group and Ryuto had already formed countless blood feuds. Both sides were now fighting in the open and in the dark every day. Under such circumstances, it was simply unrealistic for Ryuto to suddenly reconcile with Iam and become a couple. In other words, this time, Iam was destined to be a one-sided love. The man would not be interested in her at all, so what was there to say? However, when faced with such a realistic problem, Iam smiled slightly and said confidently, "As long as I am willing, any man will be willing to kneel down and lick the soles of my shoes." From an objective point of view, Iam's words were not wrong at all. After all, with her peerless beauty and LV5 charm, she could basically make the vast majority of humans bow down to her, regardless of gender. However, Rinka clearly knew that Ryuto was definitely not among the vast majority of humans. She had to continue to ask carefully, then, what if Ryuto Kiryo's knees are a little stiff, and he can't kneel down? Can't kneel down? That's simple. Yongji replied in a relaxed tone, "Why don't you just break it? If that doesn't work, you can just use a saw to cut off his legs. If he doesn't even have his knees, he'll naturally kneel down, right?" I understand. In that case, I wish Lord Yongji success." After knowing that it was useless to say anything else, Rinka gave up the idea of persuading Iam with words. But even so, when she thought of the violent collision between Iam and Ryuto, Rinka felt that her brain was about to boil. What's going on? What's going on? Iam suddenly became lovey-dovey? She wants to turn Ryuto into a subject under her skirt? How is this possible? Just when Rinka walked away in a daze, Iam, who returned to her room, was like a primary school student who was preparing to go on an outing. She happily picked up the clothes that she would use to date Ryuto tomorrow. How about this? Or this? By the way, what color underwear does Ryuto like? There doesn't seem to be this in the intelligence. Why don't I pass it to him one by one? Hee. When choosing clothes, Iam didn't seem to think about whether tomorrow's date would go as she imagined. Instead, she was immersed in the sweet feeling of love. This scene was truly, abnormally terrifying. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.